The fluorescent lights of St. Mary's Hospital cast harsh shadows across Maria's exhausted face as she finished another grueling 16-hour shift. Her scrubs still bore the faint stains of a traumatic emergency room case, but it was the identical twins sitting alone in the waiting room, each bearing the same crescent-shaped birthmark on their left wrists. That made her heart stop cold. Maria knew that birthmark intimately. She had traced its outline countless times on her own baby's wrist before she was forced to give her up 20 years ago. As Maria approached the twins with trembling hands, memories of her painful past came flooding back, the desperate choice she made as a struggling teenage mother, the promise from the adoption agency that her daughter would have a loving home, and the devastating news years later that there had never been just one baby, but two. Could these young women be the daughters she had searched for all these years? And what dark secret had kept them apart until now? If this story touched your heart, please like, subscribe to our channel, and share your own experiences with unexpected family reunions in the comments below. Maria's legs felt unsteady as she approached the young women. They sat huddled together, their matching dark hair framing identical heart-shaped faces. 20 years as a nurse had taught her to keep her composure in the most harrowing situations. But nothing had prepared her for this moment. "Excuse me," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I couldn't help but notice you've been waiting a while. Can I get you anything? Water? Coffee?" The twins looked up simultaneously, their eyes striking amber, color widening slightly at the nurse's attention. "Coffee would be amazing," said one, offering a tired smile. "I'm Emily, and this is my sister, Olivia." "Maria Santos," she replied, her gaze drawn to their wrists as they both pushed their hair back in the same unconscious gesture. The crescent birthmarks were unmistakably like the one she had memorized 20 years ago, a distinctive shape that resembled a waning moon. "We're waiting for news about our mom," said Olivia. "She had a heart attack this morning." Maria nodded sympathetically. "I'm sorry to hear that. Dr. Wilson is excellent, he's taking good care of her, I'm sure." As she spoke, Maria's mind raced back to another hospital, another time. She had been just 17, terrified and alone in a delivery room. The memory was still vivid, the pain, the exhaustion, and then the indescribable love when they placed her baby girl in her arms. The crescent birthmark on the tiny wrist had seemed magical somehow, a special sign just between mother and daughter. "One moment," Maria said. "I'll get that coffee." In the staff break room, Maria's hands shook as she poured 2 cups. She leaned against the counter, closing her eyes. The adoption had been closed, her parents' decision, not hers. They had been immigrants from the Philippines, deeply religious and mortified by their teenage daughter's pregnancy. The boy who'd gotten her pregnant had disappeared the moment she told him, leaving Maria to face her parents' disappointment alone. She had been allowed only an hour with her baby before the social worker came. In that hour, Maria had counted tiny fingers and toes, whispered promises of love, and traced the crescent birthmark over and over, committing it to memory. Just one beautiful girl, the nurse had told her. Healthy and perfect. But there had never been just one. Somehow, Maria had always known that, deep down. Even before she found the paperwork 5 years ago, an administrative error that mentioned twin A and twin B in her file, discovered during a routine digitization of old records. The revelation had sent her on a desperate search, but the adoption agency had closed years earlier, its records sealed or lost. Maria added sugar to 1 coffee cup and left the other black, a strange maternal instinct guiding her. She returned to the waiting room, where Emily was now pacing while Olivia sat watching the door to the emergency department. "One with sugar, one without," Maria said, offering the cups. "I took a guess." Emily took the black coffee, Olivia the sweetened one. Maria felt a chill run down her spine at the small confirmation. "Thank you," Emily said. "You didn't have to do that." "It's no trouble," Maria replied, fighting to keep her voice steady. "I'm finishing my shift, but I'd like to check on you both later, if that's okay." "Your mother's name?" "Margaret N," Olivia answered. "She's been admitted, but we're waiting to see her," Maria nodded, making a mental note. "I'll see what I can find out for you." As she walked away, Maria's heart pounded in her chest. The birthmarks couldn't be a coincidence. The age was right. The timing was right. But how could she be sure? And if these were her daughters, what would she say to them? How could she explain what had happened without sounding like she was making excuses or, worse, trying to disrupt their lives? In the locker room, Maria pulled out the small photos she kept tucked in her wallet. A faded hospital Polaroid of a newborn's wrist with a crescent-shaped birthmark, the only physical evidence she had of her daughter's existence. Now suddenly, there were two young women with that same mark, sitting in her hospital. Maria changed out of her scrubs with mechanical movements, her mind racing. She wasn't scheduled to work again until tomorrow night, but there was no way she could go home now. Not when every instinct told her that after 20 years of searching, she had finally found what she had lost. Maria sat in her car in the hospital parking lot, unable to leave. Rain pattered against the windshield, matching the storm of emotions swirling inside her. She pulled out her phone and scrolled to a contact she hadn't called in months. Dr. Anna Wilson, the hospital's chief of cardiology, and Maria's former roommate from nursing school. "Anna, it's Maria. I need a favor." 20 minutes later, Maria sat across from Anna in the doctor's private office, hands wrapped around a fresh cup of coffee. "You think these girls might be your daughters?" Anna asked, her brow furrowed with concern. "Maria, that's incredible if true, but also complicated, legally and ethically." "I know," Maria whispered. "But the birthmarks, Anna, identical. The same shape I've had burned into my memory for 20 years. Anna leaned back in her chair. "Tell me everything. From the beginning." Maria closed her eyes, allowing herself to fully remember what she'd spent years trying to forget. She had been a high school senior with dreams of becoming a doctor. Her parents had come to America from Manila when Maria was just 5, working multiple jobs to give her opportunities they never had. Then she met Javier in chemistry class, charming, ambitious, with dreams as big as her own. Their relationship had been a secret. Her traditional parents would never have approved. When Maria discovered she was pregnant, Javier's dreams suddenly didn't include her or a baby. He left town without a word, leaving Maria to face her parents alone. They were devastated, Maria told Anna, not just disappointed, heartbroken. In their eyes, I had thrown away everything they'd sacrificed for. My father couldn't even look at me. Her mother had made the decision. Maria would carry the baby to term. Abortion was not an option in their devout Catholic household, but would give it up for adoption immediately. After graduation, no one would ever need to know. Maria could still go to college, still have the future her parents had worked so hard to provide. "I was 17, terrified, and completely alone," Maria continued. "My friends weren't allowed to associate with me anymore. I was pulled out of school for the last semester, supposedly for homeschooling. I lived like a ghost in my parents' house. The day of the delivery was a blur of pain and confusion." Maria remembered being heavily medicated, in and out of consciousness. "They told me I had a girl, one baby girl. I only got to hold her for an hour before the adoption agency representative came." Maria's voice broke. "I counted her fingers and toes. I traced that birthmark and promised her I'd find her someday, when I was stable and could give her the life she deserved." The paperwork had been handled by her parents. Maria was simply told to sign, closed adoption, no contact, a fresh start for everyone. "I did what they wanted because I thought it was best for the baby. I was in no position to be a mother." Maria wiped away tears. "But I never stopped thinking about her. When I finally had the courage to look into finding her, the agency was gone. All records supposedly sealed or destroyed. 5 years ago, Maria had received an unexpected call from a former employee of the now-defunct adoption agency, who was helping digitize old records. She found my file and noticed something odd: references to Twin A and Twin B, but only one adoption placement recorded. She thought I should know. The revelation had shattered Maria's world all over again. Not only had she lost her daughter, but she'd never even known about the second baby. Where had that child gone? How could the agency separate twins? It was unthinkable. I hired a private investigator, but he hit dead ends everywhere. Most of the agency staff had moved away or died. Records were incomplete. It was like searching for ghosts. Maria had never given up hope, but as the years passed, It seemed increasingly unlikely she would ever find answers. Until today. And now they're here, in this hospital, Anna said softly. Both of them. Maria nodded, her hands still trembling. Margaret N. is their mother, or, at least, one of their mothers. Emily said our mom. But something in the way Olivia reacted made me wonder if they share the same adoptive parents. Margaret N., Anna repeated, typing the name into her computer. Admitted this morning with acute myocardial infarction. Stable but serious condition. She looked up at Maria. I can't give you more details without violating privacy laws. I understand, Maria said. I just need to know if they're okay. Both the girls and Margaret. Anna studied her friend's face. What are you planning to do, Maria? These young women have lived their entire lives without knowing you. You can't just walk up and announce you're their birth mother. I know, Maria said. But I can't walk away either. Not now. I've waited 20 years for this chance. A knock at the door interrupted them. Anna's assistant poked her head in. Dr. Wilson, the N family is asking if they can see their mother now. Anna nodded. I'll be right there. She turned back to Maria. Take some time to think this through. These girls are here for their mother who's seriously ill. This isn't the moment to drop another bombshell on them. Maria stood, smoothing her clothes with shaking hands. I'll be careful, I promise. I just need to know more before I decide what to do. As they walked out together, Anna squeezed Maria's arm. Whatever happens, I'm here for you. But please, proceed with caution. There are 4 lives that could be forever changed by what you do next. Maria watched as Anna walked toward the waiting room where Emily and Olivia sat. Her daughters? 20 years of emptiness, of wondering, of searching, and now they were here, within reach. But Anna was right. She needed to be careful. She needed to be sure. She pulled out the old photo of the birthmark again. It wasn't proof, not really. But it was enough to keep her from leaving the hospital tonight. For the first time in 20 years, Maria Santos had hope, and she wasn't about to let it slip away again. Maria waited in the hospital cafeteria, nursing a cup of tea that had long gone cold. The clock on the wall showed nearly midnight. But she couldn't bring herself to leave. She had texted her neighbor to feed her cat, and tried to prepare herself for whatever might come next. When she spotted Emily and Olivia entering the cafeteria, Maria's breath caught in her throat. They looked exhausted, shoulders slumped as they approached the coffee station. Before she could second-guess herself, Maria stood and walked over. Any news about your mother? She asked gently. Emily looked up, recognition flickering in her eyes. The nurse from earlier, Maria, right? Maria nodded. I'm off duty now, but I wanted to check on you both. That's really kind, Olivia said. They're keeping her in the ICU overnight. Dr. Wilson says the next 24 hours are critical. I'm so sorry, Maria said sincerely. Would you like to join me? You both look like you could use a break. The twins exchanged a glance, then nodded. Maria led them back to her table, her heart pounding so loudly she was certain they must hear it. Have you eaten anything? She asked, sliding into nurse mode. When they shook their heads, she insisted on buying them sandwiches from the vending machine. Thank you, Emily said, unwrapping her sandwich with trembling hands. It's been a crazy day, I can imagine, Maria said carefully. You mentioned earlier that Margaret is your mother, both of you. A shadow passed between the twins. Olivia spoke first. It's complicated. Margaret is Emily's adoptive mother. I only met them 6 months ago. Maria's pulse quickened. Oh. How did you find each other? Emily set down her sandwich. One of those DNA ancestry websites. I was curious about my medical history since I'm in med school. I never expected to find a twin sister. I was raised by the Pearsons in Seattle. Olivia explained. They never told me I was a twin. When the DNA match came back, I thought it was a mistake. We video called that same day, Emily continued. It was surreal, like looking in a mirror. We both had the same birthmark too, which confirmed it wasn't just some crazy coincidence. Maria nodded, trying to appear merely interested rather than desperate for every detail. That must have been quite a shock for both of you. Understatement of the century, Olivia said with a short laugh. I flew to Boston the next weekend. Margaret was as surprised as we were. She had no idea I existed. The agency never told her about a twin? Maria asked, her voice carefully neutral. Emily shook her head. No, and that's not all they lied about. Olivia reached across the table and squeezed her sister's hand. We've been piecing it together over the past few months. The Pearsons paid almost twice what Margaret did for the adoption. Different caseworkers, different paperwork. It's like they deliberately separated us and covered it up. That's horrible, Maria whispered, genuine anger rising in her chest. Have you tried to find your birth mother? The question hung in the air. Maria held her breath. We've talked about it, Emily said slowly. But with school and work, and now with Margaret's health, double quotes, she trailed off, looking torn. I want to find her, Olivia said firmly. I have questions. Like, did she know we were twins? Did she agree to separate us? Or was she lied to as well? Maria gripped her cup tightly. What would you say to her, if you found her? The twins exchanged another look. I don't know, Emily admitted. Part of me is angry. Even if she was young or couldn't keep us, how could she agree to split up twins? Don't think she knew, Olivia countered. An argument they'd clearly had before. The Pearsons never mentioned a twin, and they had all the paperwork. I think someone at that agency was doing something illegal. Maria fought to keep her expression neutral, though her heart soared at Olivia's defense. What about you? Emily asked suddenly. Do you have children? The direct question caught Maria off guard. I know. Not that I raised, she said carefully. I had a baby when I was very young. Adoption. Both twins stared at her with sudden intensity. I'm sorry, Emily said softly. That must have been difficult. Maria nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. Do you ever think about finding her? Olivia asked. Every day, Maria whispered. For 20 years. A tense silence fell over the table. Maria wondered if she'd said too much, revealed too much emotion. But before she could redirect the conversation, Dr. Wilson appeared at their table. Emily, Olivia, she said gently, your mother is awake and asking for you. The twins immediately stood, gathering their things. Thank you for the food and company, Emily said to Maria. It really helped. I'm here tomorrow night if you need anything, Maria replied, trying to sound casual. I hope your mother improves quickly. As they turned to leave, Olivia paused. Those ancestry DNA tests, they've reunited a lot of families. Maybe it could help you too. Maria managed a smile. Maybe it could. She watched them walk away with Dr. Wilson, her heart both fuller and heavier than it had been in years. They were her daughters. She was certain of it now, but gaining their trust and, eventually telling them the truth, would be delicate. She couldn't rush this. Not when they were already dealing with Margaret's illness. Maria gathered her things and finally headed for the exit. As she passed the hospital chapel, she stopped and went inside. The small room was empty at this late hour. She sat in the back pew, closed her eyes, and for the first time in many years, she prayed not for herself, but for 4 women whose lives were about to change forever. Maria returned to St. Mary's the following evening for her shift, arriving early to check Margaret and chart. The woman had stabilized overnight, but her condition remained serious moderate damage to the heart muscle that would require careful monitoring and eventual lifestyle changes. As Maria made her rounds, she deliberately saved Margaret's room for last. When she finally entered, she found Emily dozing in a chair while Olivia stood by the window, gazing out at the city lights. The woman in the bed, Margaret, was awake, her gray-streaked hair fanned across the pillow. Good evening, Maria said. Softly, I'm Maria, your nurse for tonight. How are you feeling, Mrs. N? Margaret's eyes, the same amber shade as the twins, focused on Maria with surprising intensity. Better than yesterday, she said, her voice raspy. I'm glad to hear it. I need to check your vitals if that's all right. As Maria wrapped the blood pressure cuff around Margaret's arm, she felt the woman studying her face. Maria kept her expression professional, though her hands trembled slightly. Your daughters were in the cafeteria last night, Maria said conversationally. They mentioned you've had quite a journey recently, discovering Olivia. Margaret's eyes never left Maria's face. Yes, she said carefully. It's been illuminating. Something in the way she said it made Maria glance up. Their eyes met, and a jolt of recognition passed between them. Margaret knew. Somehow, she knew who Maria was. Before Maria could process this, Emily stirred and woke. "Mom, how are you feeling?" she asked, immediately alert. "Just tired, sweetheart," Margaret replied, breaking eye contact with Maria. "The nurse is taking good care of me." Maria finished checking Margaret's vitals, noting them in the chart. "Everything looks stable. The doctor will be in later to discuss your treatment plan." As she turned to leave, Margaret suddenly reached out and grasped Maria's wrist. "Thank you," she said, her voice carrying a weight of meaning beyond simple gratitude. Maria nodded, unable to speak, and left the room. She leaned against the wall in the corridor, her mind racing the way Margaret had looked at her. It wasn't the look of a stranger. But how could Margaret possibly know who she was? An hour later, Maria was at the nurse's station when Olivia approached. "My mother Margaret is asking for you," she said. "If you have a minute." Maria glanced at the station clock. "I can spare a few minutes. Is everything okay?" "I think so," Olivia said. "She just wants to talk to you." When they entered the room, Emily was gone. "Coffee run," Olivia explained, taking a seat by the window again, her attention politely focused on her phone. Margaret gestured weakly for Maria to come closer. "You're her, aren't you?" Margaret whispered when Maria leaned down. "Maria Santos, the birth mother." Maria froze, her heart pounding. "How did you?" "I worked at New Beginnings Adoption Agency," Margaret said, her voice barely audible. 20 years ago, I remember your case." The room seemed to tilt around Maria. She gripped the bedrail to steady herself. "You worked there?" Margaret nodded slightly. "I need to tell you everything, but not here." "Not now." Her eyes flicked toward Olivia. "In my purse, there's a letter. I've carried it for years, hoping I'd find you someday." Maria's gaze followed Margaret's to a worn leather handbag on the side table. "I don't understand." "Take it," Margaret whispered urgently. "Read it alone, then you'll understand why. Her voice faltered, and tears filled her eyes. "Why I took Emily. Why I've been searching for you both all these years." Maria straightened up, professional mask back in place. "Try to rest, Mrs. N. I'll check on you again soon." As she turned to leave, Margaret caught her hand again. "I always knew you'd find them," she said, loud enough for Olivia to hear. Then her eyes closed, exhaustion overtaking her. Olivia looked up from her phone, puzzled. "What was that about?" Maria shook her head. "She's tired. The medication sometimes causes confusion." She gestured to the purse. "She wanted me to check something in her purse medication she's worried about." Olivia nodded and passed the bag to Maria. "I should go find Emily. Will you be okay with her for a minute?" "Of course," Maria assured her. As soon as Olivia left, Maria quickly opened the purse. Inside was an envelope, yellowed with age, addressed simply to Maria Santos. With shaking hands, she slipped it into her pocket just as Emily returned with coffee. "How is she?" Emily asked, setting the coffee down. "Resting comfortably," Maria replied. "She's stable, which is good news." Maria completed her shift in a fog, the letter burning a hole in her pocket. When her relief arrived at midnight, she changed quickly and found an empty consultation room. Locking the door, she finally pulled out the envelope. Inside was a handwritten letter dated 18 years ago. As Maria began to read, tears filled her eyes. "Dear Maria, you don't know me, but I know you. My name is Margaret N., and I worked as an administrative assistant at New Beginnings when you gave birth to twin girls. Yes, twins. I'm writing this letter in the hope that someday I can give it to you in person and explain what happened. New Beginnings wasn't what it appeared to be. The director, Richard Kavanaugh, had a scheme running. When twins or siblings came through, he would often separate them, one placed through official channels, one sold through private arrangements for much higher fees. The paperwork was altered, records falsified. Most birth mothers, especially young ones like yourself, never knew. When I discovered what was happening, I was horrified. I reported it to the state licensing board, but Kavanaugh had connections. Before any investigation could begin, A fire destroyed most of the physical records. The agency closed, Kavanaugh disappeared, and the children remained separated. I couldn't stand by and do nothing. I took Emily Twin A in your file through proper legal channels. But Twin B had already been placed with a wealthy family in Washington state. I've spent years trying to track her down, and you as well. But the trail went cold. I've raised Emily with love, always intending to tell her the truth when she was old enough to understand. I never imagined the sisters would find each other. Before I could find you. I'm sorry for my part in this, even though I tried to make it right. Emily has had a good life, and I've loved her as my own. But she deserves to know her birth mother and her sister. You all deserve the truth. If you're reading this, I hope you can forgive me. Margaret and Maria sat in stunned silence, the letter trembling in her hands. Everything she had suspected about the agency was true and worse than she'd imagined. They hadn't just separated her babies. They'd sold one of them for profit. And Margaret, the woman fighting for her life down the hall, had tried to make it right. Had taken in one of the twins and spent years searching for the other. For Maria. The realization was overwhelming. Margaret wasn't the enemy. She was perhaps the only reason Emily and Olivia had found each other at all. Maria carefully folded the letter and returned it to her pocket. What happened next would change their lives forever. She needed to proceed carefully. But now at least she understood what they were all facing, and she wasn't alone anymore. Maria didn't sleep that night. She sat on her apartment balcony until dawn. Margaret's letter read and reread until she'd memorized every word. Her cat Mochi curled in her lap, purring steadily as Maria tried to process everything she'd learned. By morning, she had made her decision. She would tell Emily and Olivia the truth, not just about being their birth mother, but about what Margaret had revealed about the adoption agency. They deserved to know everything. Even though the timing was far from ideal, with Margaret still hospitalized. Maria showered and dressed with care, selecting a simple blue dress instead of her usual jeans. Today wasn't about being casual or comfortable. Today was about finally meeting her daughters. When she arrived at the hospital, Dr. Wilson intercepted her in the lobby. "I was just about to call you," Anna said, her expression grave. "Margaret N had a setback overnight. We had to rush her back to the ICU." Maria's heart sank. How bad? Another cardiac event, smaller than the first, but concerning given her weakened state. "The girls are with her now." Anna studied Maria's face. "You're going to tell them, aren't you?" Maria nodded, pulling Margaret's letter from her purse. "I have to. Margaret worked at the adoption agency. She's been looking for me for years." Anna's eyes widened as Maria explained what she'd learned. "That's incredible and awful. Those poor girls. I need to see them," Maria said. To explain everything. Anna hesitated. "Margaret is very fragile right now. The shock of this revelation, could I know?" Maria interrupted. "I'll be careful, but I can't keep this from them any longer. Not now that I know the truth." When Maria entered the ICU waiting area, she found Emily and Olivia huddled together on a small sofa. Emily's eyes were red from crying, while Olivia maintained a stoic expression that didn't quite hide her fear. "Maria," Olivia said, noticing her first. "Are you working today?" "No," Maria replied, taking a deep breath. "I came to see you both, to talk to you about something important." Emily looked up, confusion crossing her face. "What do you mean?" Maria sat across from them, clutching her purse. "Yesterday your mother Margaret gave me a letter. A letter she's been carrying for years, hoping to find the right person to give it to." Emily frowned. "What are you talking about? Why would my mother give you a letter?" "Because she recognized me," Maria said softly. "From 20 years ago." Olivia straightened, her eyes sharpening with sudden understanding. "The adoption, you said you gave up a baby? ... Maria nodded, tears filling her eyes. 20 years ago, I gave birth to twins. But I was told there was only one baby. I only learned about the second child 5 years ago, when an administrative error was discovered." The twins stared at her in shock. Emily shook her head in disbelief. "What are you saying?" "I'm your birth mother," Maria said, her voice barely above a whisper. "And Margaret has been trying to reunite us for years." The silence that followed was deafening. Emily stood abruptly, backing away from Maria. "No," she said. "That's not possible. This is crazy. You can't just walk in here and claim to be our birth mother." "Emily," Olivia said, reaching for her sister's hand. "The birthmarks, remember what we said about them being so unusual." "So what?" Emily snapped. "That doesn't prove anything." Maria pulled out the old Polaroid from her wallet. "I took this the day you were born, before they took you away. I've carried it with me every day since." She held out the photo, the tiny wrist with the crescent birthmark. Identical to the marks on both twins. Olivia took the photo with trembling hands. "Oh my God," she whispered. "It's the same." Emily refused to look. "I need to get back to my mother," she said, her voice breaking. "My real mother." "Emily, wait," Maria pleaded. "There's more you both need to know. About the adoption agency. About what Margaret did to protect you. Protect me." Emily's voice rose. "By lying to me my entire life." "She didn't lie," Maria said, pulling out Margaret's letter. "She saved you. Please, just read this. It explains everything." Olivia took the letter while Emily stood frozen, torn between anger and curiosity. "It's from Margaret," Olivia said, scanning the first lines. "Dated 18 years ago." As Olivia read the letter aloud, Emily slowly sank back onto the sofa. The color drained from her face as she learned the truth about her adoption, about the agency's illegal practices, about Margaret's attempts to find Olivia and Maria, about the years of searching. "She knew," Emily whispered when Olivia finished reading. "All this time, she knew we were separated on purpose." "She tried to find us," Olivia countered. "She reported them to the authorities, but she never told me," Emily cried. "She let me believe I was alone, that my birth mother just gave me up without a second thought." Maria's heart broke at Emily's pain. "She was trying to protect you," she said gently, "and she never stopped looking for your sister, or for me." Emily turned to Maria, her expression a mixture of anger and confusion. "And what about you? If you've been searching for us, why did it take 20 years? "I tried," Maria said, her voice cracking. "When I found out there were twins, I hired investigators. I searched databases. But the agency was gone, the records destroyed. I had no names, no locations, nothing to go on. So it's just coincidence that we all ended up here?" Emily asked skeptically. "I've worked at St. Mary's for 15 years, Maria explained. "It's not coincidence, it's where I've built my life, hoping that somehow, someday, I might find you. And now you're here." Olivia, who had been quiet as she processed the letter, finally spoke. "We need a DNA test," she said practically, to be absolutely certain." Maria nodded immediately. "Of course. Whatever you need." "And I want to talk to Margaret," Emily insisted. "I need to hear this from her." "She's very weak," Maria cautioned. "Dr. Wilson said she had another cardiac event last night." "I don't care," Emily said, though her medical training made her wince. "If what this letter says is true, she's been keeping this secret from me my entire life. She owes me an explanation." Maria couldn't argue with that. "I understand. But please, be gentle with her. Whatever mistakes she made, she loves you. She tried to make things right." Emily's expression softened slightly. "I know she loves me. That's why this hurts so much." Olivia stood, still holding Margaret's letter. "Let's go see her together. All three of us. It's time we all heard the truth directly from Margaret." As they walked toward the ICU, Maria felt as though she were moving through a dream. After 20 years of searching, of hoping, of praying, here she was, walking beside her daughters. They weren't embracing her with open arms, but they weren't rejecting her either. They were giving her a chance to explain, to prove who she was. It was more than she had dared to hope for. And yet, the shadow of Margaret's condition hung over them all. The woman who had raised Emily, who had tried to reunite them all, might not survive to see the family she had helped piece back together. As they approached Margaret's room, a code alarm suddenly blared through the hallway. Medical staff rushed past them toward the ICU. "Code blue. ICU room 4, announced the overhead speaker. Emily froze. "That's Mom's room," she whispered. And then she was running. With Olivia and Maria close behind, the next 48 hours passed in a blur of hospital corridors. whispered conversations, and tense waiting. Margaret had survived the cardiac arrest, barely. She was now stabilized but in critical condition, heavily sedated and connected to a ventilator. Emily hadn't left her side except when forced to by hospital regulations. Olivia alternated between sitting with her newly discovered adoptive mother and pacing the hospital corridors, processing the shocking revelations about her birth and adoption. Maria had taken emergency family leave from work, calling in a favor from her supervisor. She couldn't bear to be away from the hospital now, even though Emily still regarded her with suspicion and hurt. On the third morning, Dr. Wilson found Maria in the hospital chapel. "They're ready," Anna said simply. Maria nodded, rising from the pew. They had all agreed to DNA testing the day after Margaret's second cardiac event. Anna had expedited the process, calling in favors from the hospital's genetics lab. In a small consultation room, Emily and Olivia waited. Emily looked exhausted, dark circles under her red-rimmed eyes. Olivia appeared calmer, but the tension in her shoulders betrayed her anxiety. "I have the results," Anna said, taking a seat across from them. She placed a sealed envelope on the table. "Would you like me to read them, or would you prefer to look yourselves?" "You read it," Emily said, her voice hoarse from lack of sleep. "Just ... tell us." Anna opened the envelope and scanned the document inside. Her expression gave nothing away as she looked up at the three women. "The DNA analysis confirms with 99.9997% certainty that Maria Santos is the biological mother of both Emily N. and Olivia Pearson," she said quietly. Olivia exhaled sharply. Emily closed her eyes, a single tear tracking down her cheek. "There's no doubt," Anna continued. "The genetic markers are conclusive." The room fell silent. Maria's hands trembled in her lap. For 20 years, she had dreamed of this moment of finally, definitively knowing she had found her daughters. But the reality was complex, messy, fraught with emotions she hadn't anticipated. "Thank you, Dr. Wilson," Maria finally said, "for expediting this." Anna nodded, standing. "I'll give you some privacy." After she left, the three women sat in silence, the weight of confirmation hanging between them. "So it's true," Emily finally said, her voice flat. "Everything Margaret wrote in that letter. The agency separated us, sold Olivia to the highest bidder." Olivia began. "No, it's true," Emily insisted. "The Pearsons paid double what Margaret did. They bought you, like ... like a commodity." "They didn't know," Olivia said defensively. "Whatever that agency did, my adoptive parents thought they were going through proper channels." Maria leaned forward cautiously. "The letter suggests the families weren't told about the twins. That was part of the deception." Emily turned to Maria, really looking at her for the first time. "And did you know? Did you agree to separate us?" "No," Maria whispered, her heart breaking at the accusation. "I was told I had one baby girl. I only held one of you. I never knew there were twins until 5 years ago, when that paperwork surfaced." Emily studied Maria's face, searching for deception. Finding none, she asked, "Why did you give us up at all?" The question Maria had prepared for her entire adult life. The explanation she had rehearsed countless times, imagining this very scenario. "I was 17, she began softly. "My parents were Filipino immigrants who worked multiple jobs to give me opportunities they never had. When I got pregnant, the boy disappeared. My parents were devastated. Not just disappointed, but heartbroken. In their eyes, I had thrown away everything they'd sacrificed for." Maria took a deep breath, the memories still painful after all these years. "My mother made the decision. I would carry to term. Abortion wasn't an option in our Catholic household, but give the baby up immediately. After graduation, no one would ever know. I could still go to college, still have the future they'd worked for." She looked at her daughters, willing them to understand. "I was a child myself, with no support, no money, no way to care for a baby. The adoption papers promised you'd go to a loving family who could give you everything I couldn't." Her voice broke. "I thought I was doing what was best for you." Olivia reached across the table and squeezed Maria's hand, the first physical contact between them. "Thank you for being honest with us." Emily remained rigid, her medical training at war with her emotional response. The DNA confirms biology, she said carefully. But it doesn't change who raised me. Margaret is still my mother. Of course she is, Maria agreed immediately. I would never try to replace her. I just, I've wondered about you every day for 20 years. Wondered if you were happy, healthy, loved. Finding you both, it's a miracle I never thought would happen. You became a nurse, Olivia observed. Was that because of us? Maria nodded. After the adoption, I was lost. My parents expected me to move on, to forget, to follow the plan they had for me, but I couldn't. I dropped out of pre and disappeared for a while. She hadn't told anyone this story in years, the dark months after the adoption, couch surfing with distant relatives, working minimum wage jobs, falling into depression. When I finally pulled myself together, I decided to become a nurse. I thought, maybe by helping others, I could somehow make up for not being able to help you, to be there for you. Emily's expression softened slightly. You've been at St. Mary's for 15 years. Yes, I started in maternity, but it was too painful. I transferred to emergency, then cardiac care. All those years, Olivia mused. We could have crossed paths at any time. I've thought about that too, Maria admitted. How many times might we have been in the same room, the same building, without knowing? A beep from Emily's phone interrupted them. She checked it quickly. Standing, Margaret's physician is doing rounds. I should be there. The moment of connection broke. Emily gathered her things, her walls visibly rising again. Emily, Maria said gently. I understand your loyalty. To Margaret, she raised you, loved you, protected you. I'm grateful to her for that. Emily paused at the door. She was going to tell me. When Olivia found me, Margaret said she had something important to tell us both. Then she had the heart attack. She was trying to do the right thing, Maria said. We all were, in our own ways. Emily nodded, her expression unreadable. I need to go. After she left, Olivia sighed heavily. Give her time. This is a lot to process, especially with Margaret so ill. I know, Maria said. I've waited 20 years. I can wait a little longer. Olivia studied Maria's face. You really never stopped looking for us, did you? Never, Maria confirmed. Even when it seemed hopeless. Something inside me always knew I'd find you someday. Olivia smiled slightly. Well, you were right. She stood, gathering her purse. I should check on Emily and Margaret. Of course, Maria said, trying to hide her disappointment at the conversation ending. At the door, Olivia turned back. Would you like to get coffee later? Just the two of us. I have questions about you. About where we come from. Maria's heart leaped. I'd like that very much. Good, Olivia said with a small smile. Because DNA doesn't lie, and according to science, you're my mother. After Olivia left, Maria remained in the consultation room, overwhelmed by emotions. The DNA test had confirmed what she already knew in her heart. But biology was just the beginning. Building relationships with her daughters, especially with the wary Emily, would take time, patience, and understanding. And hanging over it all was Margaret's precarious condition. The woman who had raised Emily, who had tried to right the wrongs of the past, was fighting for her life. Maria closed her eyes and whispered a prayer for Margaret's recovery. For all their sakes, Maria and Olivia sat at a small table in a cafe. Across from the hospital, the morning rush had passed, leaving the place quiet enough for conversation. Olivia stirred her latte absently, gathering her thoughts. The Pearsons, she began, weren't exactly the warm, loving family the adoption agency promised. Maria's heart sank. They weren't good to you. They weren't bad, Olivia clarified. They never abused me or anything like that. They just, never really wanted a child. They wanted the idea of a child. She explained how her adoptive father, Richard Pearson, was a prominent corporate attorney in Seattle. Her adoptive mother Elaine was from old money, involved in charity work that was more about social standing than actual charity. I was an accessory, Olivia said, a hint of bitterness in her voice. Something to complete their perfect image. The beautiful baby they could show off at parties, then hand back to the nanny. As Olivia grew older, the emotional distance only widened. She was enrolled in the best private schools, given expensive clothes and toys, taken on lavish international vacations, but rarely hugged, rarely told she was loved. I was raised by a series of nannies and housekeepers, she continued. Some were kind, most were professional and distant. I learned early not to get too attached because they never stayed long. Maria listened with a growing ache in her chest. This was exactly what she had feared, that her child might be materially comfortable but emotionally neglected. What about friends? She asked. Other family? Olivia shrugged. The Pearsons kept to themselves. Their friends were business associates, not people you'd invite to a backyard barbecue. I had school friends, but the Pearsons discouraged close relationships. Too messy, too complicated. She described a childhood of isolation in a beautiful glass house on Lake Washington, where appearances mattered more than feelings, and achievement was the only acceptable form of self-expression. I was expected to excel at everything, Olivia said. School, piano, tennis, French. Nothing was ever quite good enough. If I got an A-, they wanted to know why it wasn't an A. If I won second place in a competition, they wanted to know why I hadn't won first. That sounds incredibly lonely, Maria said softly. Olivia nodded. It was, but I didn't know any different. I thought all families were like that, polite strangers, living under the same roof. She took a sip of her latte before continuing. The day I turned 18, I moved out, got an apartment with 2 roommates, enrolled in community college instead of the Ivy League schools the Pearsons had planned for me. It was the first real decision I made for myself. How did they react? Maria asked. They were furious, threatened to cut me off financially. Olivia smiled slightly. I told them to go ahead. I'd rather be poor and free than rich and controlled. They didn't cut me off completely, appearances again, but they made it clear I was a disappointment. Maria felt a surge of pride at her daughter's courage. That must have been difficult. It was the best decision I ever made, Olivia countered. I learned who I was without their expectations crushing me. I worked as a barista, took night classes, made real friends for the first time. Eventually, Olivia had found her way to a paralegal position at a small law firm specializing in family advocacy. The irony wasn't lost on her working in family law when her own family was so dysfunctional. Then the DNA test happened, she said, her expression softening. Finding Emily, it was like finding a piece of myself I never knew was missing. We connected instantly, despite growing up so differently. Maria smiled. Tell me about Emily's childhood. Was it very different from yours? Night and day, Olivia confirmed. Margaret was as amazing. A single mom who worked as a school librarian, living in a small house in a Boston suburb. Not wealthy, but Emily never felt deprived. She described how Margaret had read to Emily every night, attended every school event, created traditions like Sunday pancake breakfasts and summer camping trips. The house was always warm, often messy, filled with books and art projects and the smell of home-cooked meals. Emily had neighborhood friends, cousins who visited regularly. A dog named Scout. She went to public school, played soccer badly but enthusiastically, learned to bake from Margaret's mother. Olivia's voice held a touch of wistfulness. It was everything a childhood should be. I'm so glad, Maria whispered, tears pricking her eyes. That's what I wanted for you both. Emily doesn't remember ever not knowing she was adopted, Olivia continued. Margaret was always open about it, told her how special she was, how she had been chosen. She even kept a small box of items from the adoption, the blanket Emily was wrapped in, the hospital bracelet, first photos. The contrast between the 2 upbringings was stark. One child raised with privilege but little affection, the other with modest means but abundant love. The Pearsons never discussed my adoption, Olivia said. When I asked questions as a child, they changed the subject. When I pressed as a teenager, they shut me down completely. They made it clear it was a closed chapter, not to be reopened. Did they know about the birthmark? Maria asked. Did they ever mention it being unusual? Olivia absently touched her left wrist, where the crescent mark was barely visible beneath her watch strap. They hated it. My mother Elaine wanted me to have it removed, called it unsightly. I always refused. She smiled slightly. It was the one part of me that felt truly mine, not something they could control or change. Maria reached across the table, gently turning Olivia's wrist to see the birthmark. I remember tracing this shape the hour I had with you or with Emily. I still don't know which of you I held. Does it matter? Olivia asked. Maria shook her head. No, you're both my daughters. I've loved you both every day of your lives, even when we were apart. Olivia's eyes glistened with unshed tears. The Pearsons never said that to me. Not once in 20 years. I'm so sorry, Maria whispered. If I had known, ... You couldn't have known, Olivia said firmly. And despite everything, I'm okay. I survived. I built my own life. And now I have Emily and Margaret, and ... you. The last word hung between them, tentative but hopeful. Have you told the Pearsons about finding Emily? About me? Maria asked. Olivia shook her head. They're in Europe for the summer. Some villa in Tuscany. I left a message about Emily months ago, but they never responded. They probably think it's messy and inconvenient. And what about you? Maria asked carefully. Is this finding us messy and inconvenient for you too? Olivia looked directly at Maria, her amber eyes so like Maria's own, clear and determined. This is the least messy I've felt in my entire life. For the first time, things make sense. I make sense. Maria felt a weight lift from her heart. One daughter, at least, seemed ready to forge a relationship with her. Emily would take more time, her loyalty to Margaret creating understandable complications. But there was hope. We should get back, Olivia said, checking her watch. Emily will be wondering where I am. As they walked back toward the hospital, Olivia asked, what was my father like? Emily wants to know too, though she won't admit it. Maria sighed. Javier was charming, ambitious, and ultimately selfish. When I told him I was pregnant, he disappeared, transferred to another school, changed his phone number. I never heard from him again, so he doesn't know about us either. No, Maria said. I tried to find him a few times over the years, thinking he had a right to know. But it was like he vanished completely. Olivia nodded thoughtfully. Maybe that's for the best. We have enough complicated family dynamics to deal with right now. As they approached the hospital entrance, Olivia suddenly stopped and turned to Maria. I want you to know something. Whatever happens with Emily, whatever happens with Margaret, I'm glad I found you. Before Maria could respond, Olivia hugged her, brief but real, their first embrace. Then she pulled away, embarrassed by her own emotion, and hurried into the hospital. Maria stood frozen for a moment. The feeling of her daughter's arms around her, more precious than anything she had experienced in 20 years. 3 days after, the DNA test confirmed Maria's maternity. Margaret N. was finally taken off the ventilator. Her condition had stabilized enough for her to breathe on her own, though she remained weak and tired easily. The doctors were cautiously optimistic about her recovery, though they warned it would be a long road ahead. Emily had barely left Margaret's side, sleeping in a recliner beside the hospital bed and taking only brief breaks when Olivia insisted. The strain showed in the dark circles under her eyes and the tension in her shoulders. But her medical training had made her a fierce advocate for Margaret's care. Maria had kept her distance, respecting Emily's need for space. She'd returned to work, taking evening shifts so she could be available during the day if needed. Though Olivia texted her with updates, Maria hadn't seen either of her daughters in person since their coffee shop conversation. On the 4th day, as Maria was preparing for her shift, her phone buzzed with a text from Olivia. Mom, awake and talking. Asking for you. Room 412 now. Maria froze, her scrub top half pulled over her head. Margaret was asking for her. After changing quickly, she hurried to the 4th floor, her heart pounding. Outside room 412, she hesitated, unsure of her welcome. Through the partially open door, she could hear Emily's voice, low and intense. Are you sure about this, Mom? You need to rest. I've rested enough, came Margaret's weak reply. I need to speak with her while I still can. Don't talk like that, Emily said sharply. You're getting better, Emily. Margaret's tone, though frail, held a note of determination. Please. Maria knocked softly before entering. Margaret lay propped against pillows, looking pale and diminished but alert. Emily stood beside the bed, her posture protective. Olivia sat in the visitor's chair by the window, offering Maria a small smile of encouragement. "You wanted to see me?" Maria asked, remaining near the door. Margaret nodded, gesturing weakly to the empty chair on the other side of her bed. "Please, sit. We have much to discuss." Emily moved as if to object, but Margaret placed a frail hand on her arm. "Sweetheart, would you and Olivia give us a few minutes alone?" The twins exchanged glances, a silent communication passing between them. Emily looked reluctant, but Olivia stood and gently tugged her sister's sleeve. "We'll get some dinner," Olivia said. "Be back in 20 minutes. After they left, an awkward silence filled the room. Maria sat carefully in the chair, acutely aware of the beeping monitors and the smell of antiseptic. "They've told me about the DNA test," Margaret finally said, her voice thin but steady. "Not that I needed it. I recognized you immediately." "From 20 years ago?" Maria asked. Surprised, Margaret nodded. "You were so young, but your eyes, ... they're the same, and both girls have your eyes." "They have your spirit," Maria replied. Softly at least, Emily does. "That determination?" A ghost of a smile crossed Margaret's face. "She's stubborn, that one. Always has been." Her expression grew serious. "Did you read my letter?" "Yes. Several times." "Then you know what happened." "What I did." Maria leaned forward. "You tried to make things right. You protected Emily, tried to find Olivia." Margaret's eyes filled with tears. "Not soon enough. Not well enough. I should have tried harder to find you years ago. Should have told Emily the truth sooner." "You did what you thought was best," Maria assured her. "We all did." Margaret's gaze was direct. Despite her weakness, "I need to know if you blame me for taking Emily, for not finding Olivia sooner." The question caught Maria off guard. "Blame you? No, you saved Emily from who knows what kind of placement. You tried to report what was happening. You're the reason they found each other at all. But if I had been braver, moved faster..." "Stop," Maria said gently. "What's done is done. We can't change the past. All we can do now is move forward, together." Margaret studied Maria's face. "You're not what I expected." "What did you expect?" "Anger, resentment, a desire to take Emily away from me." Maria shook her head firmly. "Never. You raised her, loved her, made her the amazing young woman she is today." "I'm grateful to you, Margaret." Tears slipped down Margaret's pale cheeks. "I always told her about you. That her birth mother loved her very much but couldn't keep her. That she was wanted and cherished, even though we'd never met you." "Thank you for that," Maria whispered, her own eyes filling with tears. "It means more than you can know." "I kept everything," Margaret continued. "Hospital bracelet, first blanket, the little hat they put on her. I made a memory box, thinking someday we might find you and she'd want to share it." Maria's heart ached with gratitude and lost gratitude for Margaret's loving care. Loss for the moments she had missed. "Emily is struggling," Margaret said after a moment. "With all of this, with you." "I know," Maria acknowledged. "She loves you. She's protective of you. I respect that. She feels torn, disloyal somehow, if she accepts you. I understand. I'm not trying to replace you, Margaret. I would never want to." Margaret reached for Maria's hand, her grip surprisingly strong. "Listen to me. I don't have much time." "Don't say that," Maria interrupted. "You're recovering." "I'm realistic," Margaret countered. "My heart is damaged beyond repair. The doctors have been honest with me, even if they're cushioning it for the girls." Maria couldn't deny the medical reality. Margaret's prognosis was guarded at best. "They need you," Margaret continued urgently. "Both of them." "Emily won't admit it yet, but she does. When I'm gone, Margaret, when I'm gone," she repeated firmly, "they'll need their mother, their birth mother, the connection to where they came from, who they are." Maria squeezed Margaret's hand gently. "I'll be there for them, I promise. Emily will push you away at first. She's stubborn, like I said. But don't give up on her, never," Maria vowed. "But you need to focus on getting stronger, not on saying goodbye. They need you too." Margaret's lips curved in a small, sad smile. "We're both their mothers, in different ways. I've had Emily for 20 years. Loved her, raised her. But there are things only you can give them: the connection to their heritage, their biology, the answers to questions I could never provide. She coughed, the effort clearly exhausting her. I don't regret adopting Emily. Best decision of my life. But I do regret not finding you sooner, not being brave enough to tell the whole truth years ago. You did the best you could with an impossible situation, Maria assured her. We all did. The door opened, and Emily entered with Olivia close behind. Emily immediately assessed Margaret's monitors, frowning at what she saw. Your heart rate is elevated, she said accusingly to Maria. She needs to rest. It's fine, Emily, Margaret said. We needed to talk. Emily adjusted her mother's pillows, checked her foreline. You should sleep now. The doctor will be back for evening rounds soon. Margaret reached for Emily's hand. Stop fussing. I'm not going anywhere just yet. The tense moment was broken by a knock at the door. Dr. Wilson entered, clipboard in hand. How's our patient today? She asked, her professional demeanor firmly in place, despite her personal connection to the situation. Ready to go home, Margaret said with a weak smile. Anna chuckled. Not quite yet, I'm afraid. But your latest tests show improvement. The medication seems to be working. She ran through Margaret's vitals, explaining the treatment plan moving forward. The damage to Margaret's heart was significant. But with proper medication and eventual cardiac rehabilitation, there was hope for recovery, though life would never be quite the same. We'll need to discuss long-term care options, Anna concluded. But that can wait until you're stronger. After she left, Margaret looked at the three women surrounding her bed: her daughter, her daughter's twin, and their birth mother. An unusual family, pieced together by fate and determination. I want to go home, she said suddenly. Not to stay in the hospital. Mom, you're not strong enough, Emily protested. I don't mean now, Margaret clarified, but soon. One want to recover. At home, with all of you. Emily looked confused. All of us. Margaret nodded. You, Olivia, and Maria. I want us all together, as a family. While we still can be. The request hung in the air, startling in its simplicity and its complexity. Emily's expression was unreadable, caught between resistance and recognition of her mother's wishes. We'll make it work, Olivia said firmly, breaking the silence. Whatever you need, Margaret. Maria nodded in agreement, though her heart raced at the implications. Living together, all of them, navigating the delicate relationships that were still so new and fragile. Good, Margaret said, settling back against her pillows, visibly exhausted. That's settled then. As she drifted into sleep, Emily, Olivia, and Maria exchanged glances, uncertain, hopeful, apprehensive. None of them had anticipated this turn of events, this forced proximity that would either heal their fractured family or expose the fault lines that could never be repaired. But for Margaret's sake, they would try. A week later, Margaret was strong enough to be moved out of the ICU, to a standard room. The doctors were cautiously optimistic about her recovery, though they emphasized she would need months of rehabilitation and her heart would never regain full function. Emily had taken a leave of absence from her medical residency to oversee her mother's care. Olivia had extended her stay in Boston indefinitely, working remotely as much as possible. And Maria continued her nursing shifts, stopping by Margaret's room whenever she could. The arrangement was awkward at times. Emily remained coolly polite to Maria, accepting her presence but maintaining an emotional distance. Olivia moved between them like a diplomat, trying to ease tensions and build bridges. One evening, as sunset painted Margaret's hospital room in golden light, she asked to speak with Maria alone. Emily frowned but complied, dragging a reluctant Olivia to the cafeteria for dinner. They hover, Margaret said with a weary smile as the door closed behind the twins. Emily especially. It's exhausting being loved so fiercely. She's afraid of losing you, Maria replied, taking the now familiar seat beside the bed. We all are. Margaret waved away the sentiment. I'm tougher than I look. But that's not why I wanted to talk to you. She took a deep breath. I need to confess something. Something I haven't told the girls yet. Maria tensed, unsure what new revelation could possibly emerge. When I worked at New Beginnings, Margaret began, I wasn't just an administrative assistant. I was the office manager. I had access to all the files, all the records. I knew what Richard Kavanaugh was doing with the twin placements. I knew, and for too long, I did nothing. The admission hung in the air between them. Why? Maria finally asked. Margaret's eyes filled with tears. Fear, cowardice. I needed the job, a single woman in her 40s with few prospects. And Kavanaugh. He could be charming when he wanted to be. Convincing. He made it sound almost noble. Placing twins with different families who could each devote themselves fully to one child. She looked down at her hands, thin and pale against the hospital blanket. But that wasn't the real reason, of course. It was money. Always money. The wealthy clients paid enormous facilitation fees that went straight into his pocket. When did you realize what was happening? I think I always knew something wasn't right, Margaret admitted. But I convinced myself it wasn't my business. That the babies were going to good homes regardless. I compartmentalized, justified. Then I saw your file. Margaret described how Maria's case had been different. Most of the young mothers who came through New Beginnings were so overwhelmed, so detached from the process, that they barely registered what was happening. But Maria had been alert, present, clearly heartbroken to be giving up her baby. You've asked to hold her, Margaret recalled. Most girls didn't. You counted her fingers and toes. You traced that birthmark over and over. You whispered promises to her. I watched from the doorway, and something in me broke. Maria remembered that hour, vividly, the weight of her baby in her arms, the softness of her skin, the quiet desperation of trying to memorize every detail before saying goodbye. When Kavanaugh told the nurse to take the baby, Emily Ann said nothing about her twin. I confronted him, Margaret continued. He dismissed me, said the other baby had already been placed through another agency, that it was standard practice with twins. I knew he was lying. In the following days, Margaret had searched the records, finding references to twin B, and a substantial payment from the Pearsons of Seattle. She'd gone to Kavanaugh again, threatening to report him to the authorities. He laughed at me, Margaret said bitterly. Said it would be my word against his, that I'd been complicit for years. He was right, of course. I was as guilty as he was. But something had shifted in Margaret. She couldn't continue being part of the deception. When Emily came up for official placement, Margaret had applied to adopt her herself. Kavanaugh was furious, she recalled. But I had documentation of his schemes by then. I threatened to expose everything if he didn't approve my application. He relented, but warned me to stay away from the Pearson placement. Maria listened, stunned by the complexity of what had happened. Why didn't you try to find me then? To tell me about both babies? Margaret's expression crumpled with remorse. I should have. God knows I wanted to. But your file listed you as underage, and the consent forms were signed by your parents. There was a note specifically stating you didn't want future contact. I believed it was what you wanted. It wasn't, Maria whispered. My parents made that decision, not me. I'm so sorry, Margaret said, reaching for Maria's hand. By the time I gathered the courage to look for you anyway. To tell you the truth, regardless of those forms, the agency was under investigation. Kavanaugh must have gotten wind of it, because suddenly there was a fire in the records room. All the paper files, destroyed. The timing matched what Maria had learned years later. Mysterious fire, an abrupt closure, an adoption agency that seemed to vanish overnight. What about digital records? Maria asked. Wiped clean, Margaret replied. Kavanaugh was thorough in covering his tracks. The investigation stalled without evidence. He disappeared, presumably with millions in fraudulent adoption fees. And Olivia, Maria asked, did you try to find her? Margaret nodded, tears now flowing freely. For years, I hired private investigators, followed every lead. But the Pearsons had changed her birth name completely, moved several times. The trail always went cold. She described her growing desperation as Emily got older, asking questions about her birth family that Margaret couldn't answer. She had told Emily she was adopted from the beginning, sharing age-appropriate details, and always speaking positively about her birth mother. I never told her about having a twin, Margaret confessed. I was afraid she'd feel incomplete, afraid she'd resent me for not finding her sister. Then when she got older, afraid she'd blame me for my role at the agency. I kept pushing it off, telling myself I'd explain everything when she was older, when I had more information. But the right time never came. Until Olivia found her through the DNA test. Maria said softly, "Yes," when Emily called me, shaking with excitement about finding an identical twin. Margaret's voice broke. I knew my time was up. I had to tell them everything. I was planning to. That weekend they were both visiting. Then my heart had other ideas. Maria squeezed Margaret's hand. "You've carried this burden a long time." "Too long," Margaret agreed. "I need to tell them the full truth. Just about the agency and the separation, but about my part in it. My failure to act sooner, my cowardice." "It wasn't cowardice to adopt Emily," Maria pointed out. "To protect her, to love her. That was the easy part," Margaret said with a sad smile. "Loving Emily was the most natural thing in the world. The hard part was facing my own complicity and what happened to all those families. To you." Maria was quiet for a long moment, processing everything she'd heard. The anger she might have felt years ago had mellowed into something more complex: understanding, compassion, even gratitude. "I forgive you, Margaret," she said finally. "For whatever part you played, whatever mistakes you made. You saved my daughter. You gave her a beautiful life. And now, you've helped bring us all together." Margaret's tears fell faster. "I don't deserve your forgiveness." "It's not about deserving," Maria said gently. "It's about healing. Moving forward, we've all made mistakes, Margaret. What matters is what we do now." Margaret nodded, exhausted by the emotional confession. "Will you help me tell them? Emily will be so angry." "I'll be there," Maria promised. "We'll face it together." As Margaret drifted into a troubled sleep, Maria sat beside her, their hands still linked. To mothers bound by extraordinary circumstances, by the daughters they both loved in different ways, the full truth would be painful for Emily and Olivia to hear. But it was necessary, the final piece of the puzzle that had shaped all their lives for 20 years. The next morning Margaret's condition worsened unexpectedly. A complication with her medication sent her blood pressure plummeting, requiring emergency intervention. Though the doctors stabilized her quickly, the episode was a stark reminder of her fragility. Dr. Wilson ordered additional monitoring and pushed back any discussion of discharge. Margaret was frustrated but too weak to argue effectively. Emily was frantic, her medical knowledge making her acutely aware of all the potential complications that could arise. "I knew it was too soon to talk about going home," she said, pacing Margaret's room while Olivia and Maria sat quietly nearby. "Your heart needs more time to heal, Emily," Margaret said tiredly. "Please stop pacing. You're making me dizzy." Emily stopped abruptly, then sank into the chair beside the bed. "I'm sorry, I just... I can't lose you, Mom." Margaret reached for her hand. "I'm not going anywhere just yet. But we do need to talk, all of us, about what I told Maria last night." Emily looked sharply at Maria. "What did you tell her?" "It's not what she told me," Maria clarified. "It's what Margaret told her, about the adoption agency." Margaret nodded. "There's more to the story than I've shared so far. I need to tell you everything, while I still can." Emily's expression tightened. "Can't this wait until you're stronger?" "No," Margaret said firmly. "It's waited too long already." Olivia moved closer to the bed. "We're listening, Margaret." Over the next hour, Margaret repeated her confession, filling in the details of her role at New Beginnings. Her gradual realization of Kavanaugh's schemes, her failure to act sooner, and her eventual decision to adopt Emily herself. She held nothing back: not her initial complicity, not her fear of exposure, not her years of searching for Olivia and Maria, while keeping the truth from Emily. When she finished, the room was silent except for the steady beep of the heart monitor. Emily sat frozen, her face pale with shock. Olivia looked thoughtful, processing the revelations with measured calm. "You knew," Emily finally said, her voice barely audible. "You knew all along that I had a twin, that I'd been separated from my sister, and you never told me." "I was wrong," Margaret admitted. "So wrong. I told myself I was protecting you, but I was really protecting myself, from your disappointment, from your anger." "Well, you have that now," Emily said, standing abruptly. "You've had my entire life to tell me the truth, and you chose not to. Again and again, you chose to lie." "Emily," Olivia began. "No," Emily cut her off. "Don't defend this. She worked for the agency that separated us. She knew what they were doing to other families, to other twins, and she did nothing until it affected her directly." Margaret didn't try to defend herself, accepting Emily's anger as justified. "And you," Emily turned to Maria. "Did you know about this? Is that why you've been hanging around, playing the long-lost mother? Were you in on it too, Emily?" Margaret protested weakly. Maria kept her voice calm. "I learned about Margaret's full role at the agency last night, just as you're learning now. I had no idea about any of this until a few weeks ago, when I saw you both in the waiting room." Emily's anger seemed to deflate slightly, leaving her looking lost and young. "I don't know what to believe anymore. My whole life feels like a lie." "Not a lie," Margaret said softly. "Just incomplete. I loved you from the moment I saw you, Emily. That was always true. I tried to be the best mother I could be, by keeping me from my twin, from my birth mother, by giving you stability, security, love," Margaret countered. "I made terrible mistakes. Yes. But loving you was never one of them." Emily turned away, moving to the window to hide her tears. Olivia approached her sister, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. "I know this is a shock," she said quietly. "It is for me too. But Margaret did try to find me. She did try to make things right." "Too little, too late," Emily muttered. "Maybe," Olivia acknowledged. "But she's telling us now. She's not making excuses. She's asking for understanding, not absolution." The sisters stood together at the window, their identical profiles outlined against the afternoon light. Maria watched them, her heart aching for the years they had lost, for the pain they were all experiencing now. "I need some air," Emily said suddenly, pulling away from Olivia. Without looking at Margaret or Maria, she left the room. Olivia sighed. "I should go after her." "Give her a little time," Margaret advised wearily. "She needs to process." After Olivia left to find her sister, Maria moved to the chair beside Margaret's bed. "That was brave," she said, "telling them everything." Margaret shook her head. "Not brave, necessary, long overdue." She looked exhausted, the emotional toll of the confession compounding her physical weakness. "Emily may never forgive me." "She will," Maria assured her. "She loves you too much not to. But it will take time." "Time I may not have," Margaret whispered. "Don't think like that," Maria urged. "Focus on getting stronger." Over the next several days, a new routine emerged. The twins took turns sitting with Margaret, never leaving her alone for long. Emily remained distant but dutiful, focusing on her mother's medical care rather than their damaged relationship. Olivia was more openly affectionate, trying to bridge the emotional gap between her sister and the woman who had raised her. Maria worked her shifts and visited during the day, sometimes bringing small treats. Margaret was allowed on her restricted diet: fresh berries, homemade soup, herbal tea. During these visits, she often shared stories about her life, filling in the blanks of who she was, where the twins had come from. "My father was an engineer in Manila," she told Margaret and Olivia one afternoon while Emily was speaking with the doctors. "My mother taught elementary school. They gave up everything to come to America when I was 5. Worked multiple jobs so I could have opportunities they never had. That's why the pregnancy was so difficult for them," Olivia realized. "All that sacrifice, and then, Maria nodded. "In their eyes, I'd thrown it all away. My father couldn't even look at me for months. They were so afraid of what people would think, of the shame it would bring on our family." "Did they ever meet us?" Olivia asked. "Their grandchildren?" "No," Maria said sadly. "They refused to come to the hospital. My aunt took me to deliver, stayed with me for that 1 hour I had with the baby. After the adoption, my parents never spoke of it again. It was as if it had never happened." "Are they still alive?" Olivia's questions were gentle but direct, seeking to understand her heritage. "My father passed 10 years ago. My mother lives in a nursing home now. Early onset dementia. She usually doesn't recognize me when I visit." "I'm sorry," Olivia said, reaching for Maria's hand. These small physical connections had become more frequent between them. a tangible sign of their growing relationship. What about your culture? Margaret asked unexpectedly. Do the girls have any connection to their Filipino heritage? The question surprised Maria. No, I suppose not. That's something I could share with them, if they're interested. I am, Olivia said immediately. Very interested. I never knew where my features came from, certainly not the Pearsons with their Scandinavian coloring. Maria smiled, touched by Olivia's enthusiasm. I could teach you to cook some traditional dishes. My Lola, my grandmother, taught me before she passed. As they talked, Emily returned, pausing in the doorway at the scene before her adoptive mother, her twin, and her birth mother engaged in animated conversation. For a moment, longing flashed across her face, a desire to be part of this emerging family unit. Despite her lingering anger and confusion, Maria saw it and held out her hand. Join us. I was just offering to teach Olivia some Filipino cooking. Emily hesitated, then entered the room. Mom's latest tests look better, she reported, addressing no one in particular. Her cardiac function is improving. That's wonderful news, Margaret said, patting the edge of her bed. Sit, sweetheart. Maria was telling us about her parents, your grandparents. Emily stiffened at the reference, but sat cautiously. I've been thinking, she said after a moment, about what you told us about the agency. I want to know more about what happened to other twins, other families. It was the first time Emily had referred directly to Margaret's confession since her angry exit days earlier. Margaret's eyes filled with hope. I kept records, she said. Copies of documents, notes about the cases I remembered. They're in a safe deposit box at my bank in Boston. You kept records? Maria asked, surprised. Even after the fire? Margaret nodded. Insurance. Protection, in case Kavanaugh ever came after me for adopting Emily, and ... in case I ever found the courage to come forward. Emily looked at her mother with new understanding. You were planning to expose them all along, eventually, Margaret admitted. When you were older, when I'd found Olivia and Maria, when I was sure you were all safe. The hospital room fell quiet as they absorbed this new information, evidence that might help other separated families, other twins who didn't know they had siblings in the world. When you're stronger, Emily said finally, we'll get those records, all of us, together. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was a beginning, a tentative step toward healing the fractures that ran through their unusual family. Outside the window, the sun broke through clouds that had lingered all day, casting warm light across the four women bound by secrets, separated by choices, but finally finding their way back to each other. 2 weeks after her second cardiac event, Margaret was finally cleared for discharge. Her recovery had been slow but steady, each day bringing small improvements. The doctors had outlined a comprehensive rehabilitation plan: medication, dietary restrictions, physical therapy, and regular follow-up appointments. Remember, Mrs. N, Dr. Wilson cautioned during her final round, your heart has sustained significant damage. You need to take things extremely slowly. No lifting, no stairs without assistance, no stress, no stress. Margaret repeated with a wry smile. In this family, Dr. Wilson glanced at Emily, Olivia, and Maria, who were all present for the discharge. Instructions, that's where your support system comes in. You're lucky to have 3 capable caregivers. Emily had already transformed Margaret's small Boston home, rearranging furniture to eliminate obstacles, installing grab bars in the bathroom, setting up a temporary bedroom on the first floor. Olivia had extended her leave of absence from the law firm indefinitely, citing family medical emergency. And Maria had arranged to take a month of accumulated vacation time to help with the transition. The arrangement had been Margaret's ideal for women living under one roof during her initial recovery. Emily had resisted at first, uncomfortable with Maria's inclusion, but Margaret had been adamant. My heart can't take the strain of you girls tiptoeing around each other, she'd declared. We need to figure this out together, as a family. Now, as a nurse helped Margaret into a wheelchair for the hospital discharge, the reality of their situation was sinking in. For women to mothers, 2 daughters, all connected in a tangle of biology and choice and circumstance, about to live together in a modest 3-bedroom house. Are you sure about this? Maria asked Margaret quietly as they waited for the hospital valet to bring Emily's car around. I can stay at a hotel nearby, be available when needed. Margaret reached for Maria's hand. I'm sure. This is what we all need, even if some of us don't realize it yet. Maria nodded, though uncertainty gnawed at her. Emily's attitude toward her had thawed slightly over the past week, moving from outright hostility to cautious civility. But they were far from comfortable together, and Maria worried that forced proximity might damage the fragile progress they'd made. The drive to Margaret's house was mostly silent. Emily focused on navigating Boston's notoriously confusing streets, while Olivia kept up a stream of cheerful commentary about the neighborhoods they passed, clearly trying to fill the awkward silence. In the back seat, Margaret dozed against Maria's shoulder, exhausted by the simple act of leaving the hospital. When they arrived at the modest Victorian in Jamaica Plain, Emily pulled into the narrow driveway and cut the engine. Home sweet home, she announced, her voice tight with emotion. For Emily and Margaret, it was indeed home, the house where Emily had grown up, where her childhood photos still lined the stairwell, where her height had been marked on the kitchen doorframe in pencil. For Olivia and Maria, it was unfamiliar territory, a physical space filled with the history they had missed. Getting Margaret settled took most of the afternoon. Emily fussed over every detail: the angle of the hospital bed they'd rented, the arrangement of medications on the bedside table, the firmness of the pillows supporting her mother's back. Emily, Margaret finally said, if you adjust that blanket one more time, I might have another heart attack out of sheer irritation. Emily froze, then let out a surprised laugh. Sorry, medical training, can't help myself. You're a wonderful daughter and a terrible patient, Margaret observed fondly. Now please, go help your sister and Maria with dinner. I can hear them clattering around in the kitchen from here. In the kitchen, Olivia and Maria were indeed making considerable noise as they familiarized themselves with Margaret's outdated appliances and eclectic collection of cookware. How can someone own 6 different sizes of cake pans, but not a single decent sop pan? Olivia wondered aloud, digging through a lower cabinet. Margaret mentioned she likes to bake, Maria replied, examining a battered copper pot. Emily said it was a weekend tradition: Sunday morning coffee cake. Emily appeared in the doorway, watching them explore her childhood kitchen. Mom's a stress baker, she confirmed. After a tough week at the school library, we'd have cookies for days. That explains my sweet tooth, Olivia said with a smile. Must be genetic. Actually, Maria interjected, that might come from my side. My mother was famous for her bibingka Filipino coconut rice cakes. I could eat a dozen in one sitting as a child. Emily moved into the kitchen, opening a drawer and pulling out a stack of takeout menus. Maybe we should just order something tonight. Mom needs to rest, not listen to us destroying her kitchen. We're not destroying anything, Olivia protested. We getting acquainted with it. Besides, Maria added, I promised Margaret some homemade chicken soup. Hospital food left a lot to be desired. Emily hesitated, clearly torn between wanting to maintain control and recognizing the olive branch Maria was extending. Fine, she said finally. But I should warn you, that stove has a mind of its own. As they prepared a simple meal: chicken, soup, garden salad, and crusty bread from a nearby bakery, the 3 women established a tentative rhythm. Emily knew where everything was kept, directing Olivia and Maria as needed. Olivia chopped vegetables with surprising skill for someone raised with household staff, and Maria seasoned the soup with herbs from Margaret's small windowsill garden, adding a pinch of this and a sprinkle of that without measuring. How do you know how much to add? Emily asked, watching Maria taste the broth and nod in satisfaction. Feel, Maria replied. My grandmother never used recipes. She taught me to cook by instinct, by taste, by memory. The Pearsons' chef wouldn't let anyone in the kitchen, Olivia commented. I taught myself to cook in college by watching cooking shows. Turns out I'm pretty good at it. Another genetic trait, Maria suggested. My father could burn water, but my mother and I both loved cooking. Emily didn't contribute to this line of conversation, but she listened intently, absorbing these small details about her biological heritage. When the meal was ready, they set up a tray for Margaret and gathered around her bed to eat together. Margaret looked more relaxed than she had in weeks, clearly happy to be home, surrounded by family. "This soup is exactly what I needed," she declared after the first spoonful. "Hospital food is a form of torture. You should know," Emily teased. "You spent enough time bringing me horrible cafeteria sandwiches during my med school all-nighters, which you ate without complaint," Margaret reminded her. "Unlike the broccoli battles of your childhood." "Broccoli battles?" Olivia perked up. "Do tell." As Margaret launched into stories of Emily's picky eating habits as a child, Maria watched the interplay between mother and daughter. Despite everything, the revelations, the secrets, the painful truths, their bond remained strong. Margaret had given Emily something precious, a childhood filled with love, with traditions, with security. "What about you, Olivia?" Margaret asked, turning the conversation. "Were you a picky eater too?" Olivia shook her head. "The Pearsons had a rule: clean your plate or no dessert, and they always served dessert, so I learned to eat whatever was put in front of me." "Even broccoli?" Emily asked. "Especially broccoli. I actually like it." "Definitely not genetic then," Emily declared, and for the first time, she glanced at Maria with something approaching humor in her eyes. The moment was small but significant in acknowledgement, however tentative, of their shared biology, their connection. Maria smiled back, careful not to overreach, to push too hard. After dinner, as Margaret tired, they established a schedule for overnight monitoring. Emily would take the first shift, Olivia the middle of the night, and Maria early morning. It was a practical arrangement that acknowledged their different strengths: Emily's medical training, Olivia's detail-oriented nature, Maria's experience with cardiac patients. As Maria prepared for bed in the small guest room she would share with Olivia, she reflected on the day. It hadn't been perfect. There had been awkward moments, careful navigations around sensitive topics, the occasional retreat into polite silence. But there had also been laughter, shared stories, and the beginnings of understanding. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. Olivia stood in the doorway, already changed into pajamas, her dark hair pulled back in a loose braid. "Long day," she observed, moving to the twin bed by the window. "Very," Maria agreed, "but a good one." "Margaret seems happy to be home." Olivia nodded, arranging her pillows. "Emily is too, though she'd never admit it. Hospitals make her nervous, even though she practically lives in one for her residency." "It's different when it's your own mother," Maria said quietly. Olivia looked at her thoughtfully. "You know, when Emily and I are together, people always comment on how alike we look. But I see you in us too. The shape of our eyes, the way we talk with our hands." Maria felt a surge of emotion. "I see it too. Every time I look at you both." "I'm glad we're doing this," Olivia said, settling under the covers. "All of us together. It's weird and complicated and probably going to get messy, but it feels right somehow." "It does," Maria agreed. Like pieces finally falling into place after 20 years. As the house quieted for the night, with Emily sitting vigilant at Margaret's bedside, Maria lay awake listening to Olivia's steady breathing. Outside, a gentle rain began to fall, pattering against the windows of the old Victorian house that was temporarily home to 4 women connected by blood and choice, by mistakes and second chances. For the first time in 20 years, Maria felt complete. Whatever challenges lay ahead, and there would be many, they would face them together. As a family. As Margaret's recovery progressed over the next 2 weeks, the household settled into a rhythm. Mornings began with medication and vitals checks, followed by light physical therapy exercises. Afternoons often found Margaret resting, while the others handled various responsibilities, Molly consulting remotely with her residency program, Olivia fielding work calls and emails, Maria checking in with the hospital about her eventual return. Evenings became a time for sharing stories, and gradually, memories. What had begun as awkward small talk evolved into deeper conversations, tentative explorations of the 20 years they had spent apart. One rainy Saturday afternoon, Margaret asked Emily to retrieve a storage box from the hall closet. The blue Plastic one, she specified. On the top shelf. Emily returned with a large container labeled simply Emily Early Years. Margaret patted the bed beside her. I think it's time we shared this. As Emily removed the lid, Maria and Olivia moved closer, curious. Inside was a meticulously organized collection of mementos, baby clothes, toys, school artwork, and dozens of photographs documenting Emily's childhood. I kept everything, Margaret explained. From the very beginning. She pulled out a small, white hospital bracelet. The name Baby Girl, a clearly visible on the faded plastic band. This was on your wrist when I brought you home, she told Emily. The adoption agency gave me a different name to use, Elizabeth, but I chose Emily instead. It felt right somehow. Maria reached out tentatively, touching the tiny bracelet. They put similar ones on at the hospital when you were born. I only saw one baby, one bracelet. Margaret nodded, understanding the significance of the moment. She continued through the box, showing them Emily's first shoes, a lock of hair, from her first haircut, report cards, and birthday cards. You documented everything, Olivia observed, a hint of wistfulness in her voice. I kept a journal too, Margaret said, pulling out a leather-bound book. Every milestone, every funny saying, every tantrum and triumph. I wanted to remember it. Emily, who had seen most of these items before, watched Olivia's face as she examined the physical evidence of the childhood they hadn't shared. The Pearsons didn't keep things like this. Olivia shook her head. Not that I ever saw. There was a formal portrait taken every year for the Christmas card, but no scrapbooks, no baby shoes bronzed for posterity. She picked up a crayon drawing of a lopsided house with 4 stick figures. You were quite the artist. That's our family, Emily explained. Me, Mom, Scout, our dog, and Ms. Whiskers the cat. I was very literal with naming pets. You had pets. Olivia sounded envious. The Pearsons were allergic, or so they claimed. I think they just didn't want the mess. Margaret pulled out another album. This is from our camping trips. We went every summer to the White Mountains. Emily was a champion marshmallow roaster. As they paged through the album, Maria noticed a pattern in the photos. Emily engaged in activities she herself had loved as a child. You played soccer? She asked, pointing to a team photo of 8-year-old Emily in a blue uniform. Emily nodded. For years. I was terrible, but I loved it. I played too, Maria said softly. Through high school. Center midfielder. That's the position I always wanted, Emily admitted. But I was usually stuck at fullback, because I was too cautious to play offense. I was the opposite, Olivia chimed in. The Pearsons put me in tennis lessons. Very proper, but I kept rushing the net. My coach said I was too aggressive. Maria smiled. I was the same way. Always impatient, always pushing forward. Nature versus nurture playing out in real time, Margaret observed. They continued through the box, discovering more unexpected connections. Both twins had played piano, Emily enthusiastically but without much skill, Olivia dutifully and proficiently. Both had struggled with geometry, but excelled in biology. Both had gone through a vegetarian phase in their teens. What about you? Emily suddenly asked Maria. What were you doing while all this was happening? The directness of the question surprised Maria. It was the first time Emily had expressed interest in her life during the missing years. After the adoption, I was lost for a while, Maria admitted. I finished high school, barely. My parents wanted me to go straight to college, to forget what had happened and move on with the plan. But you didn't, Olivia gassed up. Maria shook her head. I couldn't. I kept thinking about the baby, about you. Where you were, if you were happy, if you were loved. I couldn't focus on calculus and chemistry when my heart was somewhere else entirely. She described her difficult years after high school, drifting between menial jobs, living with distant relatives, eventually finding her way to nursing school, where she finally felt a sense of purpose again. I have photos too, she said, not as many or as well organized. But if you're interested, I'd like to see them, Olivia said immediately. Emily hesitated, then nodded. Me too. Maria retrieved her laptop from the guest room, opening a digital folder she'd compiled years ago, scanning old physical photos in hopes of someday sharing them with her child. "These are my parents," she began, showing them a formal portrait of a serious-looking Filipino couple. "Your grandparents, though they never knew you. This was taken before we immigrated to America." She continued through the images, various ages, her childhood home in Manila, her high school graduation where her strained smile betrayed the secret pregnancy she was hiding, and eventually her nursing school graduation. "You look so young," Emily commented, studying a photo of 22-year-old Maria in her first nursing uniform. "I was," Maria agreed. "Too young when I had you both. Probably too young when I started nursing. But I grew up fast." "Do you have any photos from when you were pregnant?" Olivia asked hesitantly. Maria shook her head. "My parents wouldn't allow it. They wanted no evidence, no reminders. The only thing I have." She pulled up an image of a yellowed hospital form with a tiny footprint. "They let me keep this. One footprint, not two." "I didn't know there should have been two." The room fell silent as they all stared at the small inked impression, a tangible link between past and present, between birth mother and daughters. "I have something similar," Margaret said softly, reaching back into her box and withdrawing a framed set of handprints. "Emily's kindergarten art project. I remember thinking how big her hands had gotten, how quickly she was growing." Emily looked between the footprint from her birth and the handprints from her childhood. Physical markers of the life she'd lived and the one she might have had. For the first time, she seemed to truly grasp what had been lost, not just for herself and Olivia, but for Maria too. "Did you ever try to find Javier?" she asked. "Our father." Maria nodded. "Several times over the years. He disappeared, so completely changed his phone number, transferred schools. I think his family moved back to Mexico. I hired a private investigator once, but the trail was cold." "Do we look like him?" Olivia wondered. "Your smile," Maria said. "That's all his pan, and maybe your stubbornness. Though that could be from either of us." He was determined, ambitious. As the afternoon wore on, they continued sharing photographs and stories, piecing together 20 years of separate lives. Margaret produced Emily's art projects and school essays. Maria shared what few mementos she had managed to keep. Olivia described the formal, sterile environment of the Pearson household, with a dry humor that made even Emily laugh. "It's strange," Olivia said as dusk fell outside the windows. "We're creating a shared history, retroactively, filling in the blanks." "That's exactly what we're doing," Margaret agreed. "Building bridges across time." Emily, who had been quiet for several minutes, finally spoke. "I used to imagine having a sister," she admitted. "When I was little, I'd talk to her sometimes, like an imaginary friend. Mom thought it was just a phase." Margaret's eyes filled with tears. "I didn't know that. I stopped when I was about 7. Decided I needed to be more grown up." Emily glanced at Olivia. "I never imagined she was real. That somewhere, she might be talking back." "I wasn't," Olivia said with a sad smile. "The Pearsons discouraged fantasy play, but I always felt like something was missing. Someone was missing." Maria watched her daughters, these young women who had found each other against impossible odds. Despite everything, the separation, the secrets, the lost years, they had somehow sensed each other's existence, carried each other in their hearts. "Twin connection," she murmured. "The doctors told me it can be powerful, even when twins are raised apart." As Margaret began to tire, they carefully repacked the memory box, each item now imbued with new meaning, new understanding. The photographs and mementos were no longer just records of the past, but bridges to the future, tangible reminders that despite 20 years apart, they were, and always had been, a family. 3 weeks into Margaret's recovery, her strength had improved enough. For short outings, her first request was to visit her bank. "The safe deposit box," she explained to Maria as Emily helped her into the car, "with the adoption agency records. It's time we looked at them together." The trip to the bank was successful, but exhausting for Margaret. When they returned home, Emily insisted her mother rest while she, Olivia, and Maria examined the contents of the large envelope Margaret had retrieved. In Margaret's small dining room, they spread the documents across the table, photocopies of internal memos, placement records with discrepancies highlighted. Notes in Margaret's precise handwriting, detailing conversations and observations, and a list of names and dates spanning nearly 15 years. This is extensive, Olivia said, her paralegal training evident as she quickly organized the papers into categories. Margaret documented everything. She was building a case, Emily realized, scanning a page of notes. For years, every twin separation she knew about or suspected. Maria picked up a photocopied form that made her heart clench, her own intake paperwork from 20 years ago, with twins scrawled in the margin and circled, then crossed out on the official version. There must be dozens of cases here, she said, gesturing to the list of names and dates. Olivia nodded grimly. At least 30 pairs that I can see at a glance. All separated through new beginnings between 1985 and 2005, Emily, still struggling to reconcile her love for Margaret with the knowledge of her role at the agency, frowned at a memo detailing premium placement fees for what were coded as special cases. They charged almost double for twins placed separately, she said, her voice tight with anger. Kavanaugh called it exclusivity pricing. The bastard, Olivia muttered, rapidly scanning the documents with her trained legal eye. This wasn't just unethical, it was criminal. Fraud, forgery, possibly human trafficking, depending on how the statutes are interpreted. Maria looked at the faces of her daughters, one a paralegal, both bringing their professional expertise to bear on the evidence before them. Pride swelled in her chest despite the painful circumstances. What do we do with all this? She asked quietly. Olivia looked up, determination in her eyes. We find the other twins. We help reunite them, like we were reunited. After 20 years. Emily sounded skeptical. Some of these separations happened in the 80s. Those twins would be in their 40s now. DNA testing? Olivia countered. The same way I found you. It's becoming more common every year. If we could somehow get the word out, encourage people adopted through new beginnings to test. We'd need legal advice, Maria cautioned. There are privacy concerns, confidentiality issues. I know someone, Olivia said. A partner at my firm specializes in family law. He's handled adoption cases before, including some ethical violations, though nothing on this scale. Emily rubbed her temples, overwhelmed. Mom kept all this evidence but never used it. Never reported it after the initial investigation fell apart. She was protecting you, Maria said gently. If she had come forward, exposed the agency's practices publicly, there might have been legal consequences for her too. Her adoption of you might have been questioned. The thought that she might have been removed from Margaret's care as a child clearly shook Emily. She was afraid of losing me. With good reason, Olivia pointed out. The system isn't always just or fair, especially when it comes to families. The Pearsons had money and influence. They probably would have been fine. But Margaret, a single woman with limited resources. They fell silent, contemplating the impossible choice Margaret had faced: expose the corruption and risk losing her daughter, or protect her family at the cost of other separated twins, remaining ignorant of their siblings. We can do now what she couldn't do then, Maria said firmly. We have resources. She didn't have legal expertise, medical knowledge, my connections at the hospital, and most importantly, we're all adults. No one can separate us again. Emily looked at her birth mother with new respect. You want to pursue this, even knowing it might become public, messy, difficult, don't you? Maria asked. These are families, Emily, brothers and sisters who may not know each other exist, just like you and Olivia didn't know. Parents who may have been lied to, just like I was. Don't they deserve the truth? Emily glanced at the scattered papers, at the evidence of lives forever altered by greed and deception. Yes, she said finally. They do. Olivia was already making notes, her organizational skills kicking into high gear. We need to approach this systematically. First, legal consultation to understand our options and limitations. Then perhaps a database of the separated twins we know about from these records. Searchable by birth date, location, any identifying characteristics, like birthmarks, Maria suggested, thinking of the distinctive crescent that had eventually helped reunite her with her daughters. Exactly, Olivia agreed. In medical histories, many adoptees seek information for health reasons. That could be our angle for outreach. The hospital might help, Maria added. St. Mary's has a patient advocacy program for adoptees seeking medical information. I could talk to them about creating a special protocol for new beginnings cases. As they brainstormed, Emily grew increasingly quiet, her medical training at war with her emotional response to the situation. Finally, she spoke. We need to be careful, she warned. These revelations could be traumatic for people who've built their entire identities without knowing they have a twin. We can't just drop this bombshell and walk away. You're right, Maria acknowledged. We need counseling resources, support systems in place. This isn't just about reuniting families, it's about helping them process what happened. I could help. With that part, Emily offered hesitantly. My residency is in psychiatry. I could develop protocols, maybe even eventually facilitate support groups. It was the first time Emily had volunteered to actively participate in their emerging plan, and Maria recognized the significance of the gesture. That would be invaluable, she said sincerely. Your perspective as both a medical professional and someone who's experienced this firsthand. Emily nodded, her expression softening slightly. I'm still angry about what happened to us, but channeling that into helping others, that feels right. Olivia reached across the table and squeezed her sister's hand. We'll do this together. All of us. The moment was interrupted by the sound of Margaret's walker in the hallway. They quickly gathered the documents, not wanting to overwhelm her with their plans while she was still recovering. Don't stop on my account, Margaret said as she entered the dining room, moving slowly but steadily. I heard voices. You've been looking at the records. We have, Olivia confirmed. And we want to do something with them. To help the other twins. Margaret eased herself into a chair, her face showing both relief and trepidation. I've waited years for this moment. To finally make things right. She looked at each of them in turn. But are you sure? This won't be easy. Kavanaugh had powerful friends, wealthy clients. They won't want this exposed. We're sure, Maria said firmly. It's time for the truth. All of it, Emily added, meeting her adoptive mother's gaze. No matter how difficult, Margaret nodded, tears forming in her eyes. Then I'll help however I can. I remember details that aren't in those papers, conversations, suspicions, patterns I noticed over time. We'll need all of that, Olivia said, her legal mind already cataloging the potential evidence. Your testimony could be crucial. As the evening progressed, they outlined a preliminary plan, careful, measured steps toward exposing the agency's practices and potentially reuniting separated siblings. They would start with legal consultation, then create a secure database of the cases they knew about, and finally develop an outreach strategy that prioritized privacy and emotional support. This could take years, Emily cautioned as they finished their planning session. Some of these twins have been separated for decades, Maria replied. A few more months or years to do this right, to make sure no one else gets hurt, that's worth it. Margaret, who had been listening quietly, reached for Maria's hand. I wish I'd had your courage 20 years ago, she said softly. Things might have been very different. Or they might not have been, Maria countered. We can't know what would have happened. But we do know what can happen now. We can help other families heal, the way we're beginning to heal. As they cleared the dining table for dinner, the mood in the house had shifted. For the first time since Margaret's hospitalization had brought them all together. They were truly united, not just by blood or circumstance, but by purpose. The investigation into new beginnings would be challenging, possibly dangerous, certainly, emotionally, but it gave them a shared mission, a way to transform their personal tragedy into something meaningful. And in that shared purpose, the remaining walls between them began to crumble. After 6 weeks of recovery at home, Margaret's doctors finally declared her stable enough to resume limited normal activities. To celebrate this milestone, Maria suggested hosting a proper family dinner at Margaret's house, not just a meal, eaten around a hospital bed or hastily assembled between medication schedules, but a real celebration. I'd like to cook for everyone, she told Margaret one morning while helping her with physical therapy exercises. Something special. A traditional Filipino meal, if you think Emily and Olivia would be interested. Margaret smiled, her color much improved from the gray pallor of her hospital days. They'd love that. Emily has always been adventurous with food, and Olivia mentioned wanting to learn more about your culture. The plan was set for Saturday evening. Maria spent the morning shopping for ingredients at a small Asian market she'd discovered in Boston's Chinatown, returning with bags full of unfamiliar items that intrigued both twins. "What's this?" Olivia asked, examining a gnarled purple root. Maria explained. "Purple yam. It's for dessert tube halea. My grandmother's recipe." Emily peered into another bag. "And these tiny limes, calamansi. They're more like kumquats, really sweeter than regular limes. We'll use them for the chicken marinade." For the first time since they'd met, Emily seemed genuinely interested in something Maria was sharing. "Can I help? I'm not much of a cook, but I can chop things without injuring myself, usually." "I'd like that," Maria said, trying to contain her excitement at this small overture. "There's a lot of prep work." Soon all three women were in the kitchen, Maria directing, Olivia and Emily chopping, mincing, and measuring according to her instructions. The house filled with unfamiliar but enticing aromas as Maria prepared chicken adobo, pancit noodles, lumpia spring rolls, and garlic rice. "My mother made these dishes for special occasions," Maria explained as she demonstrated how to fold the delicate lumpia wrappers. "Birthdays, graduations, Christmas Eve. Did you cook together like this?" Olivia asked, carefully mimicking Maria's technique with the wrapper. Maria nodded, memories washing over her. "Every Sunday it was our time together, just the two of us. My father would watch baseball on TV, and we'd spend hours in the kitchen. Margaret and I baked together," Emily offered unexpectedly. "Sunday mornings before church. Coffee, cake, or muffins, sometimes cookies if we had time." "Another parallel," Olivia observed. "Sunday cooking traditions." "What about you?" Maria asked Olivia. "Did you have any food traditions with the Pearsons?" Olivia shook her head. "The chef did all the cooking. Sunday was usually brunch at the country club. Very formal. I wasn't allowed in the kitchen at home. Too messy. Too many expensive things I might break." There was no bitterness in her tone, just a matter-of-fact acknowledgement of her different upbringing. Still, Maria felt a pang of sadness for the young Olivia, excluded from the simple domestic pleasures she and Emily had experienced. "Well, you're making up for lost time now," she said lightly. "Those lumpia look perfect." By early evening, the dining room table was set with Margaret's best dishes, candles lit, and platters of food arranged family style in the center. Margaret, dressed in a nice blouse instead of her usual recovery loungewear, was helped to the head of the table, with Emily and Olivia on either side and Maria across from her. "This looks amazing," Margaret said, surveying the feast, "and smells even better." "Before we begin," Maria said, "I'd like to propose a toast." She raised her water glass, as alcohol was still prohibited with Margaret's medications. "To health. To family. To new beginnings." "To new beginnings," the others echoed, clinking glasses as they served themselves. Maria explained each dish, the vinegar and soy-based adobo sauce that made the chicken tender and flavorful, the thin pancit noodles symbolizing long life in Filipino tradition, the crispy lumpia filled with vegetables and pork. "This is incredible," Olivia said after her first bite of adobo. "The flavor is so complex. It's all about the balance," Maria explained. "Sour, salty, a little sweet. My grandmother would adjust and taste, until it was perfect." "You clearly inherited her talent," Margaret said warmly. "This might be the best meal I've had in years." The conversation flowed naturally as they ate, moving from the food to Maria's childhood in the Philippines, to her early years in America as an immigrant trying to adapt to a new culture. She shared stories of her strict but loving parents, the extended family they'd left behind, the traditions they'd tried to maintain in their new home. "I wish I'd known all this growing up," Olivia said, helping herself to more pancit. "I used to make up stories about where I came from, who my birth parents might be. My fantasies were never this interesting." "What did you imagine?" Maria asked, curious. Olivia smiled sheepishly. Usually that my birth mother was a princess or a movie star who had to give me up for some tragic, romantic reason. The Pearsons never volunteered any information about you, so I filled in the blanks with melodrama. Sorry to disappoint, Maria said lightly. No royal blood or Hollywood connections, just a scared teenager from a strict immigrant family. Not disappointing at all, Olivia assured her. This is better real. Emily, who had been quietly enjoying the food, finally spoke. I used to ask Margaret about you sometimes. What she thought you were like, why you gave me up. Maria tensed, sensing they were approaching difficult territory. What did she tell you? That you were very young, Emily said, glancing at Margaret. That you loved me but couldn't take care of me. That you wanted me to have opportunities you couldn't provide. That was true, Maria said softly. All of it. I always wondered, ... Emily hesitated, then continued with characteristic directness. Did you ever regret it? Giving us up? The question hung in the air, heavy with implications. Margaret looked concerned, but Maria appreciated Emily's honesty. Every day, she answered simply. Not because it was the wrong decision, it was the only decision I could make at the time. But the loss, ... it stayed with me, shaped me. There wasn't a birthday, a Christmas, a milestone that passed when I didn't wonder where you were, what you were doing, if you were happy. Is that why you never had other children? Olivia asked. Maria nodded. Partly. I dated occasionally, but never seriously. No one ever measured up to the idealized father I imagined for you both, and the thought of having another child when I'd lost you ... She swallowed hard. It felt impossible. Emily set down her fork, her expression thoughtful. When Olivia found me, it was like finding a piece of myself I didn't know was missing. I imagine it was similar for you, seeing us in that waiting room. Similar but different, Maria said. For me it was finding pieces of myself I had deliberately given away thinking it was best for you. Pieces I never expected to see again. The candlelight flickered across their faces, highlighting the similarities that genetics had bestowed: the shape of their eyes, the curve of their cheekbones, the way emotion played across their features. I have questions, Emily said suddenly. Things I've wanted to ask but didn't know how. About my birth, about Javier, about your life after. Ask them, Maria encouraged. Whatever you want to know. Not tonight, Emily decided, glancing at Margaret. Tonight is a celebration, but soon. It was another small step forward. Another brick removed from the wall Emily had built around herself since discovering Maria's identity. Whenever you're ready, Maria agreed. Both of you. I have 20 years of answers waiting. As the meal continued, they shifted to lighter topics: Emily's medical school adventures, Olivia's most unusual legal cases, Margaret's favorite students from her years. As a school librarian, they laughed more freely than they had in weeks. The shared meal breaking down barriers that careful conversation couldn't penetrate. When it was time for dessert, Maria brought out the ube halea, vibrant purple pudding, garnished with toasted coconut flakes. It's beautiful, Margaret exclaimed. Like a jewel. Wait until you taste it, Maria said, serving small portions into dessert bowls. It's sweet but not too sweet, with a flavor that's hard to describe. They all took their first bites simultaneously, and Maria watched with satisfaction as surprise and pleasure registered on their faces. It's like nothing I've ever tasted, Olivia said appreciatively. Nutty but also ... floral. Exactly, Maria confirmed. Dupe has a unique flavor profile. My grandmother claimed it was food for the soul, not just the body. She was right, Emily said, taking another spoonful. This is incredible. After dessert, as they lingered at the table with cups of ginger tea, Margaret reached for Maria's hand. Thank you for this, for sharing your heritage, your traditions with us. It's their heritage too, Maria said, looking at the twins. Part of who they are, even if they're just discovering it now. I'd like to learn more, Olivia said eagerly. Maybe even visit the Philippines someday. See where you grew up. The suggestion caught Maria by surprise. I'd love that. I haven't been back since before you were born. My parents always said there was nothing to return to, but I've often thought about visiting. We could go together, Olivia continued, warming to the idea. A family trip. Emily didn't immediately reject the notion, which Maria took as progress. Instead, she asked, would your mother, your family there, would they want to meet us? My mother wouldn't understand now, with her condition, Maria said sadly. But I have cousins, aunts, uncles who remained in Manila. They'd be overjoyed to meet you both. As the evening wound down, Maria began clearing dishes despite protests from the others. You cooked, Olivia argued. We should clean up. I insist, Maria said firmly. Cooking for you all has been a gift. The first real thing I've been able to do as your mother. The word mother slipped out unintentionally, and Maria immediately tensed, afraid she'd overstepped. But neither twin flinched or pulled away. Well, if you're going to play the mother card, Olivia teased gently, I guess we have to let you. Emily stood to help Margaret back to her room, but paused beside Maria. On her way out, thank you, she said quietly, for dinner, for sharing this with us. It was important. The simple acknowledgement meant more to Maria than elaborate praise. As she washed dishes in Margaret's small kitchen, she felt a sense of peace that had eluded her for 20 years. The meal had been more than a celebration of Margaret's improving health. It had been a first tentative step toward becoming a true family. Outside the kitchen window, the first stars of evening appeared in the darkening sky. Maria remembered a Filipino superstition her grandmother had taught her, that wishes made on the first star of night would be carried directly to heaven. She hadn't believed in such things for many years, but tonight, she allowed herself a moment of childlike faith. Let us heal, she whispered to the distant star. Let us become the family we were always meant to be. 3 months after Margaret's heart attack brought them all together, their investigation into New Beginnings Adoption Agency was gaining momentum. Olivia had taken the lead, working with her firm's family law partner, James Chen, to analyze Margaret's documents and develop a legal strategy. We've identified 12 cases with enough documentation to pursue, Olivia explained during a family meeting in Margaret's living room. 2 are too old, the statute of limitations has expired. But the other 10 have potential, especially with Margaret's testimony. Emily, who had returned to her residency part-time but remained living at Margaret's house, reviewed the case files they'd compiled. Have you contacted any of these families yet? 3 so far, Olivia confirmed. Carefully, through intermediaries. 2 were receptive. They already suspected something wasn't right with their adoptions. The third ... not so much. They didn't believe you, Maria asked. Worse, they didn't want to know. Olivia's expression was troubled. The adoptive mother said their family was perfect as is, and we should leave them alone. She threatened to sue if we contacted them again. That was always the risk, Margaret said from her armchair, where she sat with a blanket across her lap. Despite the summer heat, her recovery had plateaued better than the doctors initially feared, but far from a full return to health. Some people will prefer comfortable lies to uncomfortable truths. What about Kavanaugh? Maria asked. Any leads on his whereabouts? Olivia shook her head. The private investigator found several Richard Kavanaughs, but none match our man. He likely changed his name, possibly left the country. The money trail might be more productive, James Chen suggested. He'd joined their meeting via video call, his professional demeanor softened by genuine interest in their case. Offshore accounts are harder to hide these days. My colleague in financial crimes is looking into it. Their strategy had evolved over the weeks, no longer just about reuniting separated twins, but about bringing legal accountability to those responsible. Fraud charges, conspiracy, violation of adoption regulations, possibly even human trafficking if they could prove certain elements. It was becoming a complex legal case that attracted attention from prosecutors. Once James presented the preliminary evidence, the district attorney is interested, he told them, especially given the potential scope. If we can prove this was systematic, dozens of twins separated for profit over decades, it becomes a major case. Even without Kavanaugh? Emily asked skeptically. Even without him, though finding him would strengthen the case considerably. The agency itself can be prosecuted as an entity, and there were other employees, board members, possibly co-conspirators. The conversation was interrupted by Maria's Phone ringing, she glanced at the screen, then excused herself to take the call in the kitchen. When she returned a few minutes later, her expression was a mixture of excitement and apprehension. "That was Dr. Wilson from St. Mary's," she announced. "The hospital's legal team has approved our request. They're willing to create a special protocol for adoptees from New Beginnings, seeking medical history information." It was a significant breakthrough. The hospital's involvement would give their investigation legitimacy and provide a neutral channel for potentially separated twins to find each other through medical history searches. "We should issue a press release," James suggested. "Carefully worded, but enough to alert possible victims without tipping off Kavanaugh or his associates." "I've drafted something," Olivia said, pulling a document from her folder. "It focuses on medical necessity rather than wrongdoing adoptees from New Beginnings, seeking family medical history through St. Mary's new program." They reviewed the press release together, tweaking language to balance caution with clarity. Margaret, drawing on her years of experience at the agency, suggested specific wording that might resonate with adoptive families without raising alarm. "We need to be ready for the response," Emily cautioned. "Once this goes public, we'll have anxious adoptees, defensive agencies, curious media. It could get overwhelming quickly." "My firm is prepared to handle the legal aspects," James assured them, "and St. Mary's has a process in place for medical information requests." "What about emotional support?" Maria asked, looking at Emily. "You mentioned developing protocols for families who discover they were separated." Emily nodded. "I've been consulting with colleagues in family therapy. We're establishing a support network, counselors specifically trained for this situation. My residency director has approved it as my research project." It was the most engaged Emily had been in their shared mission, applying her psychiatric training to help others who would soon be walking the same difficult path her family had traveled. "There's something else we need to discuss," Olivia said, her tone turning serious. "Media coverage. Once the press release goes out, reporters will want personal stories. They'll want our story." The implication hung in the air. Until now, their investigation had been conducted quietly, their personal connection to the case known only to those directly involved. Going public would change everything. "No," Emily said immediately. "Mom doesn't need that stress. Her recovery, I can speak for myself." "Emily," Margaret interrupted gently, "and I think we should consider it. Putting a human face to this story could help other families come forward." "Margaret's right," Maria said. "It's not just about legal justice anymore. It's about helping people find their families, like we found each other." Emily looked torn, her protective instincts toward Margaret at war with the logic of their argument. "What about privacy? Once this is out there, we can't take it back. Our lives will be public property." "To some extent," Olivia acknowledged. "But we control the narrative. We decide what to share and what to keep private." The discussion continued as they weighed the pros and cons of going public with their story. Eventually, they reached a compromise. They would participate in one carefully controlled interview with a respected journalist, focusing on the investigation and the resource for separated families rather than sensationalizing their personal drama. 2 weeks later, their press release went out, and the response was immediate. St. Mary's was inundated with inquiries from adoptees who had come through New Beginnings. The hospital's dedicated phone line rang constantly, and the secure email address received hundreds of messages in the first day alone. Among those messages were 3 from individuals who had discovered through DNA testing that they had an identical twin they'd never known about, all adopted through New Beginnings. During the period covered by Margaret's records. "It's happening," Olivia told her family as they gathered around Margaret's dining room table, reviewing the preliminary data. "People are finding each other, just like we did." The district attorney's office had formally opened an investigation, with James Chen serving as liaison between the prosecutors and the families. Financial records were being subpoenaed, former employees tracked down for interviews, adoption files examined for patterns of fraud, and then came the breakthrough they'd been waiting for. A former clerical worker at New Beginnings, now elderly, and living in Florida, came forward after seeing a news report about the investigation. She had documentation of her own copies of financial records, showing payments to offshore accounts, memos about premium placements for twins, even photographs of Richard Kavanaugh with wealthy clients. This changes everything, James told them during an emergency conference call. Her evidence corroborates Margaret's testimony and provides direct financial links. The DA is filing charges next week. The news made headlines across the country. Adoption agency accused of separating twins for profit. Families torn apart by greed, seek justice. Whistleblowers expose decades of adoption fraud. And inevitably, reporters discovered the personal connection: the nurse who had found her long-lost twin daughters by chance, the adoption agency employee who had saved one twin while searching for the other. The family pieced back together after 20 years of separation. The media clamored for their story, but they held firm to their agreement. One interview, on their terms. They chose a respected public television journalist, known for thoughtful coverage of family issues. The day of the interview, they gathered in Margaret's living room, now familiar territory for all of them. Emily sat beside Margaret on the sofa, protective as always. Olivia perched on the armrest, elegant in a simple blue dress. Maria sat in the adjacent chair, her hands clasped tightly in her lap to hide their trembling. As the cameras were set up and microphones positioned, Emily leaned over to Maria. "Are you ready for this?" she asked quietly. Maria looked at her daughter, both her daughters, and then at Margaret, the woman who had raised one of them with love and tried to make right a terrible wrong. "Yes," she said simply. "It's time for the whole truth to come out. For everyone's sake." The red light on the camera blinked on, and their private journey became public testimony, a story of separation and reunion, of secrets and revelations, of 4 women finding their way back to each other against impossible odds. And somewhere, watching the broadcast, other separated twins would recognize their own stories in this one, would reach for phones or computers to start searches of their own, would begin the journey toward wholeness that Emily and Olivia had already traveled. It wasn't just their story anymore. It belonged to all the families torn apart by greed and deception. To all the twins who sensed something missing but didn't know what or who it was. To all those still searching for their other half. 6 months after their story went public, the auditorium at Boston University Medical School was filled to capacity. Proud families and distinguished faculty members gathered to watch the graduating class of medical residents receive their certificates. Among them was Emily N., completing her psychiatry residency, with special recognition for her work developing support protocols for families affected by adoption separation. In the front row, Margaret sat in a wheelchair, oxygen tubes discreetly arranged, her face radiating pride despite her physical frailty. Beside her was Maria, elegant in a navy dress, her dark hair threaded with silver. On Margaret's other side sat Olivia, who had taken a leave of absence from her law firm to help coordinate the growing network of families connected to the New Beginnings case. As Emily's name was called, all 3 women applauded enthusiastically. Emily crossed the stage with confident steps, accepting her certificate and pausing for the official photograph. Before returning to her seat, she looked directly at the front row, offering a smile that encompassed both of her mothers, the woman who had given her life and the woman who had shaped it. After the ceremony, they gathered in the reception hall, where colleagues and fellow graduates stopped to congratulate Emily and, in many cases, to thank the family whose public testimony had launched a national conversation about adoption ethics. Dr. N. called the residency director, approaching their small group. "The hospital board would like to speak with you about expanding your adoption separation support program. They're considering establishing a permanent center, with you as director." Emily looked stunned. I'm honored, but I was planning to join a private practice. This would be 1 day a week initially, with potential to grow. Think about it, this could be your legacy." As the director moved on to greet other graduates, Olivia nudged her sister. "You have to take it. The work you've done with these families has been incredible." Emily seemed conflicted. "I've already asked so much of all of you: the investigation, the media attention, the endless meetings with lawyers and prosecutors. It's important work," Margaret said firmly. "Necessary work. And you're uniquely qualified," Maria added. "You understand the psychological impact in a way other clinicians can't." Emily looked between her 2 mothers. These women who had navigated their complex relationship with increasing grace over the past months, What do you both think? Honestly, I think you should do whatever brings you fulfillment, Margaret replied. You've always had a gift for helping others make sense of difficult emotions. If this program speaks to your heart, pursue it. And you? Emily asked, turning to Maria. Maria felt a surge of emotion at being consulted, at having her opinion valued by the daughter who had once rejected her. I think you've found your calling, she said simply. Some people spend their whole lives searching for that kind of clarity. Emily nodded thoughtfully. I'll think about it. As the reception continued, Maria helped Margaret navigate the crowded room, ensuring she didn't overtax herself. Though Margaret's condition had stabilized, her heart remained significantly damaged. She tired easily and required oxygen when active, but her mind was as sharp as ever. They're taking photos by the fountain, Olivia announced, returning from a reconnaissance mission. Family photos. We should go. They made their way outside, where a professional photographer was capturing graduates with their loved ones. When their turn came, there was a moment of awkward choreography as they arranged themselves around Emily in her formal regalia. Both mothers beside the graduate, the photographer suggested, unknowingly addressing the exact issue they were hesitating over. Sister on the end. And so they positioned themselves, Emily in the center, Margaret and Maria flanking her. Olivia completing the group. The photographer snapped several shots, then offered to take different combinations. Just me and my mom, Emily requested. The photographer looked confused, glancing between the two older women. Both, Emily clarified. Like individual photos with each of my mothers. It was the first time Emily had publicly referred to Maria as her mother. Maria felt tears threaten as she stepped aside to allow Emily and Margaret to pose together. First, the bond between them, evident in their comfortable proximity. The similar tilt of their heads, the hands clasped together. Then it was Maria's turn. As she moved beside Emily, there was a brief hesitation, a moment of uncertainty about how to stand, how close to be. Like this, Emily said quietly, taking Maria's hand and positioning it on her arm, the way Margaret had naturally done. The physical connection breached the final distance between them, and Maria smiled through tears as the photographer captured the moment. Later, as they celebrated with dinner at an upscale restaurant near the medical school, Olivia raised her glass in a toast. To my brilliant sister, Dr. Emily N. To our mothers, both of them, and to family found, formed, and forged through fire. They clinked glasses, the sound bright and clear in the intimate space they'd reserved for their celebration. I have an announcement, Olivia said as they enjoyed their appetizers. I've been offered a position with the National Center for Adoption Rights. They want me to head their new advocacy division, focusing on cases like ours: adoption fraud, family separation, reunification, support. That's wonderful, Margaret exclaimed. In Washington, Olivia nodded. It would mean leaving Boston, leaving the firm. But after everything we've been through, corporate law feels ... hollow. You should take it, Emily said immediately. You were born for this kind of advocacy. What about the Pearsons? Maria asked gently. Have they responded to any of your messages since the story went public? Olivia's expression tightened slightly. One brief email. They're disturbed by my choice to air family matters publicly, and think I should consider the impact on their reputation. No acknowledgement of what happened. No questions about you or Emily. She shrugged. I've stopped expecting anything different from them. Maria reached across the table to squeeze her hand. I'm sorry. That must be painful. Less than you'd think, Olivia replied. I've found my real family now. The Pearsons were caretakers, nothing more. The conversation shifted to the ongoing legal proceedings against New Beginnings. The former director, Richard Kavanagh, had finally been located in Portugal and was fighting extradition. Several other former employees had accepted plea deals in exchange for testimony. The case had expanded to include dozens of separated twins, some reunited after 40 years apart. The support group has 16 pairs now, Emily reported. 30 people rebuilding relationships they never knew they should have had. It's challenging work, but incredibly rewarding. Worth all the media circus? Margaret asked with a small smile. Their story had indeed created a sensation. Magazine features, television interviews, even talk of a documentary. They'd been careful to limit exposure, particularly for Margaret given her health, but their faces had become recognizable in certain circles. Worth it, Emily confirmed. Even the awkward questions, the invasive requests, the conspiracy theorists who think we made it all up. As dessert arrived, Maria found herself studying the faces around the table. Margaret, frailer than when they'd first met, but still radiating quiet strength. Emily, confident and purposeful in her professional achievements. Olivia, elegant and determined as she prepared for a new chapter. Her family, after 20 years of emptiness, of searching, of hoping against hope, here they were. What are you thinking? Olivia asked, noticing Maria's contemplative expression. That I'm incredibly fortunate, Maria replied, to have found you both. To have Margaret in our lives. To be sitting here together, celebrating Emily's achievement. We're all fortunate, Margaret said softly. Despite everything, despite the pain and separation and secrets, we found our way back to each other. Emily, who had been reserved with her emotions throughout the evening, suddenly reached for both Margaret's and Maria's hands. I've been thinking a lot about what to call you both, she said, addressing Maria directly. Mom has always been Mom to me. She nodded toward Margaret. But you're my mother too, in a different way. Maria held her breath, afraid to hope for what might be coming. I'd like to call you Mama, Emily continued, if that's okay. It feels right acknowledging both of you, the different but important roles you've played in my life. I'd be honored, Maria whispered, tears welling in her eyes. Mama is what I called my own mother. It's perfect. The moment was interrupted by a notification on Olivia's phone. She checked it, then looked up with wide eyes. The U.S. Marshals just arrested Kavanaugh, she announced. Portugal agreed to extradition. He's being brought back to face charges. The news was the final piece of their long journey toward justice. The man responsible for separating them, for lying to Maria, for creating the circumstances that had kept them apart for 20 years, would finally be held accountable. It's really over then, Margaret said, tears in her eyes. After all these years, not over, Emily corrected gently. Just beginning. The legal case, yes, but our family, we're just getting started. As they left the restaurant, Emily and Olivia walked ahead, deep in conversation about the implications of Kavanaugh's arrest. Maria pushed Margaret's wheelchair, moving slowly to accommodate her breathing. You know, Margaret said quietly, when I first saw you in that hospital waiting room, I was terrified. I thought you'd hate me for my part in all this, that you'd try to take Emily away somehow. And now? Maria asked. Margaret reached back to pat Maria's hand on the wheelchair handle. Now I can't imagine our family without you. Emily needs both of us. Different kinds of mothering, different kinds of love. To mothers, Maria agreed, better than one, especially for our headstrong daughters, Margaret added with a smile. They need all the maternal guidance they can get. Ahead of them, Emily and Olivia waited at the car. Their identical profiles outlined against the setting sun, a perfect, impossible miracle that had begun in a hospital waiting room 6 months earlier. 2 mothers, 2 daughters, 1 family, finally whole. 1 year to the day after Maria first spotted the twins in St. Mary's Hospital waiting room. The 4 women gathered for dinner at Maria's apartment. Unlike Margaret's cozy Victorian home, where they'd spent so much of the past year, Maria's place was a modern 1-bedroom in a high-rise overlooking the harbor. The space was small but warmly decorated with Filipino textiles, family photographs, and mementos from her nursing career. I can't believe it's been a year, Olivia remarked, helping Maria arrange a platter of lumpia. She had become proficient at Filipino cooking under Maria's tutelage, part of her ongoing exploration of her heritage. Sometimes it feels like we've known each other forever, and other times, like we're still getting acquainted, Maria finished for her. I know exactly what you mean. In the living room, Emily adjusted the oxygen flow for Margaret, who was having a good day but still required supplemental oxygen when active. The past year had seen a pattern of relative stability punctuated by occasional setbacks for Margaret's health. She had accepted her limitations with characteristic grace, focusing her energy on the legal case against New Beginnings, and on strengthening her family's bonds, Is that the latest batch of photos? Margaret asked, gesturing to a large envelope on the coffee table. Emily nodded, opening it to reveal dozens of photographs sent by families who had been reunited through their advocacy work. 3 more pairs found each other last month. Identical. Twins, all separated through new beginnings. All reconnected because of our case. The investigation had expanded far beyond their initial expectations. Richard Kavanaugh was awaiting trial on multiple charges, including fraud, conspiracy, and violations of adoption regulations. Several former board members and employees had been implicated as well. But more importantly to the 4 women, 47 sets of twins separated by the agency had been reunited so far, with more discoveries happening regularly as awareness spread. The eldest pair is 72, Emily reported, showing Margaret a photo of identical elderly women embracing, tears streaming down their wrinkled faces. Separated in 1953, found each other through the DNA database we established. 1 in Minnesota, 1 in Oregon, never knew the other existed until 3 months ago. All those years, Margaret murmured, studying the photos, all that lost time. But they have each other now, Emily reminded her. Because of what we did, what you did, starting with those records you saved. Maria called them to dinner, and they gathered around her small dining table, which had been extended with a folding table to accommodate them all. The meal was a fusion of Filipino dishes Maria had taught Olivia and American comfort foods Emily had learned from Margaret: chicken adobo, alongside macaroni and cheese, pancit noodles beside a garden salad with Margaret's special dressing. A perfect representation of our family, Olivia observed. Different traditions coming together. After they'd filled their plates, Maria raised her glass. A year ago today, I was finishing a double shift, exhausted and ready to go home. Instead, I saw 2 young women in the waiting room with crescent birthmarks on their wrists. She looked at her daughters, still amazed by their presence in her life. I couldn't have imagined then where we'd be now. To unexpected journeys, Margaret added, and 2 families formed in the most unlikely ways. They clinked glasses, the moment both celebratory and reflective. The past year had transformed them, Emily softening her initial resistance to Maria. Olivia finding her voice as an advocate, Margaret making peace with her complicated past. Maria embracing her role as mother to adult daughters she was still getting to know. I have news, Olivia announced as they ate. The Adoption Rights Center is establishing a permanent fund for separated twins seeking reunification. They're naming it after Usta and Santos Family Fund. That's wonderful, Margaret exclaimed. Will it help with the DNA testing costs? Olivia nodded. Testing, travel expenses for reunions, counseling services through Emily's program. Everything we wished we'd had during our own reunion. Speaking of the program, Emily interjected, we've received a federal grant to expand nationwide. I'll be traveling to train facilitators in 5 major cities over the next 6 months. My girls, Maria said proudly, changing the world. The conversation flowed easily as they shared updates on their various projects. Emily's adoption separation support program had become a model for similar initiatives across the country. Olivia's work with the National Center for Adoption Rights had expanded to include advocacy for international adoption reform. Margaret consulted from home on the legal case against New Beginnings, her institutional knowledge proving invaluable to prosecutors. And Maria had returned to nursing at St. Mary's, now dividing her time between cardiac care and the hospital's new adoption information center. Have the Pearsons reached out at all? Margaret asked Olivia, who was preparing to move to Washington, D.C. the following month for her new position. Olivia shook her head. Not since that one email. I've stopped expecting anything from them. She smiled slightly. I have all the family I need right here. After dinner, they moved to Maria's small living room, where she had prepared a surprise. On the coffee table sat a large scrapbook, its cover embossed with a simple title, Our Family. I've been working on this for months, Maria explained, opening the book to reveal carefully arranged photographs, documents, and mementos. Our story, from the beginning. The first page held the only photograph Maria had from her pregnancy, a shadowy ultrasound image where, if you looked closely, you could just make out 2 distinct shapes. They told me it was one baby, Maria said softly. But look, you can see, there were two all along. She had included her old hospital ID from the day the twins were born. The faded Polaroid of the crescent birthmark she'd carried for 20 years. And photocopies of the original birth certificates. Baby girl A and baby girl B. The next section chronicled Emily's childhood with Margaret's school photos, birthday celebrations, holidays, graduations. Parallel pages showed Olivia's more formal upbringing with the Pearson stiff portraits and expensive clothes. Posed vacation photos. Academic achievements. How did you get these? Olivia asked, surprised to see images from her childhood. Your old social media accounts, Maria admitted. I hope you don't mind. I wanted to include both your journeys. The middle of the book documented their reunion, and the tumultuous year that followed, newspaper clippings about the New Beginnings investigation, hospital photos during Margaret's recovery, candid shots of the four women learning to be a family. The final pages showed the ripple effects of their story, other reunited twins, Emily's graduation, Olivia's new position, Maria's work at the Adoption Information Center. The last page held a recent professional portrait of all four of them, taken for a magazine feature on their advocacy work. Unlike the awkward, tentative grouping from a year earlier, this photograph showed a cohesive family comfortable with each other, connected by more than just circumstance or biology. It's beautiful, Margaret said, tears in her eyes. Our whole story, together in one place. Not the whole story, Maria corrected gently. We have more to write, many more pages to fill. Emily, who had been quietly examining the scrapbook, looked up at Maria. When I was little, Margaret used to read me a bedtime story about a mother bird searching for her lost baby. I used to imagine that somewhere, my birth mother was searching for me too. Her voice caught. I never imagined she actually was. Every day, Maria confirmed, in ways large and small. Looking for you in crowds, wondering if I'd passed you on the street without knowing, hoping you were happy, loved, safe. We were, Olivia assured her, in different ways. Emily had warmth and stability with Margaret. I had privileges and opportunities with the Pearsons, and now we have each other, all of us. As the evening wound down, they helped Margaret prepare for the trip back to her house, where Emily still lived part-time to assist with her care. Olivia would stay with Maria tonight, before returning to her apartment to continue packing for her move to Washington. At the door, Margaret embraced Maria warmly. 1 year, she marveled. From strangers to family in 365 days. Not strangers, Maria corrected, just separated. Like the twins, we were always meant to be connected. After Margaret and Emily left, Maria and Olivia sat on the small balcony, overlooking the harbor lights. The night was warm, the sky clear, stars visible despite the city's glow. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you hadn't been working that night? Olivia asked. If you hadn't seen us in the waiting room? Maria considered the question. Sometimes, but I think we would have found each other eventually. The DNA testing, the investigation into New Beginnings, our paths were converging already. Maybe, Olivia agreed. But I'm glad it happened the way it did. Even with all the drama and pain and complications. So am I, Maria said softly. Every moment brought us here, to this family we've created together. Across the city, in Margaret's house, Emily was helping her adoptive mother prepare for bed. The routine was familiar, now adjusting pillows, arranging the oxygen tubing, setting out morning medications. You're quiet tonight, Margaret observed as Emily checked the oxygen tank level. Thinking about the anniversary, Emily nodded. A year ago, I only knew about half of my story, half of myself, and now I understand why I always felt there was something missing. Emily sat on the edge of the bed. Not just Olivia, though that was a huge part, but also ... Where I came from, who I came from, Maria. Margaret said, Yes, Mama. The name still felt new on Emily's tongue, but increasingly natural. Seeing her with Olivia, recognizing my own mannerisms in hers, learning about our heritage. It filled in blanks I didn't even know existed. Margaret reached for Emily's hand. I was so afraid of losing you to her, of being replaced. Never, Emily assured her. You're my mom. Always have been, always will be. Loving her doesn't diminish that. It just ... expands the circle. The next morning, Maria arrived at St. Mary's Hospital for her shift. As she walked through the main entrance, she passed the waiting room where exactly 1 year earlier, she had spotted twin sisters with matching crescent birthmarks on their wrists. She paused for a moment, taking in the unremarkable space that had changed her life so profoundly. The same uncomfortable chairs, the same fluorescent lighting, the same vending machines in the corner. Nothing about the room suggested the miracles it had witnessed. A young pregnant woman sat alone in the corner, nervously rubbing her belly. Maria approached her with a gentle smile. "First baby?" she asked kindly. The woman nodded, looking relieved to have someone to talk to. "They're doing some extra tests. The doctor says there might be 2 in there." "Twins," Maria said, her heart swelling with recognition. "How wonderful." "I'm scared," the woman admitted. "I don't know if I can handle 1 baby, let alone 2. Maria sat beside her, offering the comfort and wisdom that only experience could provide. "You're stronger than you think," she said softly. "And those babies are lucky to have each other, and to have a mother who cares enough to be scared." As her shift began, Maria moved through the hospital corridors with a lightness in her step. 1 year ago, her life had changed forever in this very building. Today, it felt right to be back where it all began, coming full circle. In the cardiac wing, patients waited for her care. In the Adoption Information Center, families sought connections to their pasts. And in the waiting room, life-changing moments unfolded for others, just as they had for her. The crescent birthmarks that had guided her to her daughters had faded slightly over the years, but remained visible on both twins' wrists, reminders of the connection that had never truly been broken, even when they were apart. Some might call it coincidence that brought them all together that night in the hospital. Others might call it fate or divine intervention, but Maria preferred to think of it as the culmination of 20 years of hoping, searching, and never giving up on the daughters she had lost. Found, at last. Their family, finally whole.